2023 board meeting to order at 5:01. With that, could I have a motion to establish the agenda?
So moved.
And a second. Thank you. All in favor, students
Aye.
and directors?
Aye.
With that, it's 1050 passage. Let's move on to professional governance. Fred.
Great. At this time, I'd like to bring forward Director Prescott as well as our members from our high school who are here to present our biology texts today. We have been kind of moving along, maybe limping along for a little while, extending our series as long as possible. Came time where we really needed to take a look at reviewing and updating our biology text. Tonight's presentation will be two textbooks from our biology department. One is our AT textbook. This one is not one that we're going to need formal action from you because it is an update of a previous version. However, for our operating norms and agreements, making sure that you are aware of the update is important. And the second update you'll receive is the core textbook for biology, which will require approval. This is a first reading tonight, and it can be put on the agenda for the next meeting. I can remember as a principal coming for a different fundamental report when the last textbook adoption was done. Larry was also here for that one. I think Jamie was also here for that one, as I recall. So bringing back our educators and our director to present to you tonight, our core textbook for biology and AP biology. Jamie.
Yeah. So by and large, this amazing team is going to walk you through the process. But much like we did with the math, there were a number of, there was a request for, what is it? Request for proposals, RFPs. That went out. There were a number of vendors that came to us then in response and wanted a shot at presenting to us. There were also some that we sought out based on information from other districts. And collectively we came down, narrowed down to 4 through a vetting process of looking at the reviews, looking online, doing some research. We had 4 different vendors come in and spend all day sharing with us about their product, their text, their support, their online integration with our services and learning management support. And then from there, whittled it down even more, provided an opportunity for community members or students to weigh in and take a look at those texts, and then ultimately selected one. So it's a really exciting one. Getting to sit in that room and see the different pros and cons of each text, and then to see that one that really stood out as like a frontliner, a headliner, was exciting. So I think our students are in for some wonderful new changes and adjustments. And I'm going to turn it over to the team to present National Geographic.
I'm Larry Benchfango. I'm a biology teacher at the high school. Been here about 30 years. I guess we'll do quick intros.
Jamie Cook. I've been here 23 years. Biology teacher previously, and then I currently instructional coach.
I'm Zachary McCauley. I teach biology and freshman physics, and this is my second year in the district.
All right, so as Dr. Rundle mentioned, we've been through this process before. It has been a while, about 12 years since the last biology adoption. And the book that we're proposing here is a brand new textbook. In fact, it's a 2024 publication date. That's a partnership between Cengage Learning and the National Geographic Society. And we'll tell you a little bit about our process and why we like this book above the other competitors.
Yeah. So, oh wow, we already went through the process here. In addition to the adoption committee, that included the 3 of us, as well as Patty Weston, who teaches a lot of sciences, as well as is the advisor for our GSA group, the Gay Straight Alliance. We also had Clay Lowry, who was able to review the book. Cynthia Yost, who's one of our special education individuals who was able to review the book. Jim McClellan, who leads our CCR department, as well as a bunch of 10th grade students were able to review it. So as you can see on the next slide, oh, sorry, we did say special thanks to the Queer Straight Alliance because they did provide some feedback specifically on some gender terminology representation in the book, as well as our Black Student Union. So in the process, we obviously could see here that we had our committee meeting with Jerry Prescott, who kind of guided us through the process and gave us some timelines. We determined those 4 books based on what we could review from our ask from the publishers, narrowed down, and really kind of after the process of the presentations they gave us, narrowed it down to 2 that we thought were really good, that met our student needs and what we needed in terms of our curriculum. And then we got a lot of student data. Every single biology teacher, I believe, provided opportunities for students to review it. I think we had at least 18 students formally review the book, given a rubric that we had that included all kinds of aspects in terms of readability, visual aspects. Does it represent gender well, and other things such as diversity and equity. And there was a lot of great feedback. The students enjoyed both books. In fact, they both received very high marks and they were very close. From that, we did do our final book choice based on various aspects we'll include, which was the National Geographic book, based a lot on the teacher feedback, what the students had said, and further engagement that we saw, that we can see in the electronic or the e-textbook and resources. As we had more access to that, is that the publication is a 2024 copyright, so there's still some parts that's still being worked on, so we got some access to some more of the online stuff past that. In addition, we did have an open review for the community and parents, open. I don't know if there was many that actually that actually chose to go review it, but it was open to the public as well as the parents.
So as has been highlighted, we narrowed down to the 2 textbooks you can see in our image here, the Inspire Biology by Macaulay Hill and of course the National Geographic Biology textbook. We found some common characteristics they both had that we were looking for, were that they both were manageable for students to carry around without being too heavy, and kind of focusing the content a little more instead of having too much information. They're both well organized, easy to follow, especially compared to some of the other books we're looking at. Both very visually appealing, great photographs, which we now engage students, use of color and quality images. They both are strongly tied to and very clearly tied to the NGSS, which is the Next Generation Science Standards, what we base all of our science teaching on, making explicit connections for students to also see how it connects to those standards. They each have an e-version of the text available as well as mobile versions, which is great. That's new for us, where students have an app they can access the text and actually edit on their devices, not just an iPad or a computer, but also on a phone. And of course, different online supporting materials available for each. What separated them and sort of made the National Geographic textbook the front runner for us was that each unit picks a specific phenomenon, and that phenomenon was well tied to the content. So it was clear, what does the phenomenon have to do with the content, and making it relevant and useful and interesting and engaging. There were really high quality virtual investigations. As Jane noted, this textbook is still, as it's a 2024 publication date, it still has some elements that are in development that we were not able to see everything for, all the virtual investigations for, but they demonstrated one of the ones that's already available, and the quality was just super high above other kinds of online investigations we've seen, and got us all really excited in the presentations. And the others are scheduled to be done, I think, by the fall, when we start to use this for the next school year. It also really emphasized a really incredible representation of scientists from around the world, different backgrounds, scientists of different races, men and women, and it was really incredible to see that would make it really interesting and accessible to students, instead of some textbooks were maybe devoid of real scientists and people and kind of left that part out. So that part we felt really powerful and hopefully feel relevant to students in that way. And when actually checking the reading levels, we found this is a slightly more accessible reading level, which would hopefully open it up to more of our learners, especially ones who are learning English or receiving other special services.
With the practicing scientists, just to add, one of their scientists that are featured in one of the phenomenon units is out of UW. And is a practicing scientist there, and they talked about, you know, the potential of her being able to come and meet with our students, and for them to be able to see somebody who is in their textbook, who is living and breathing the work that they're exploring. And that how others might be able to join virtually, but that we have some amazing experts right in our local community, and it would be great to have them come in and talk.
Is it okay to jump in with a question?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Related to what you were just talking about, and this question is for Zachary. Like, what's an example of a unit phenomenon? Like, what are the phenomena that we're talking about here?
It is so funny because I was saying like phenomenon, it's
Yeah.
very, yeah.
But we
Go ahead.
we got that on the next slide.
Oh, well, never mind.
Yeah, help Zachary to answer the question.
Yeah, so in the first unit, I think it's sort of getting students introduced to what is biology, what are we trying to understand biology, and they start with, and this is an example of virtual investigation from the first unit where you introduce to them a very strange organism called a sea pig that lives at the bottom of the ocean. It looks kind of like pig, it's translucent, it's pinkish, it has like 6 or more legs. And it walks on the bottom of the ocean and it feeds on very like detritus of whales and other things. I think it's marine snow and things like that. And it's just very puzzling trying to show students, what is this organism? What do you think it's related to? What might it share in common with those organisms? And really trying to puzzle them with a framework of understanding biology from this lens of what is this, how to relate it to other organisms, and therefore that's like a grounding sort of question or something that we can come back to throughout the unit and bring, as we learn about the nature of science and sort of classifying organisms, bring it all back to that one specific point.
Yeah. And we have a couple of screenshots in that virtual investigation. So the investigator here, Dr. Anson, is studying the seafloor with remotely piloted submersibles. And so in this simulation, you can send the submersible down to different areas on the seafloor, collect data, soil samples, water samples. You can count how many sea pigs there are there and that kind of thing. And it's a very open-ended sort of investigation where the students have to decide what are the questions they want to ask, what are they trying to understand, and then how do they interpret all that information they've collected. And all the books we looked at really were quite wonderful, and they all have virtual investigations, but most of them are very kind of prescribed, and many of them focus on things you're doing in the lab, and they're actually things that we do in the lab. So this is something that, you know, we don't have a remotely operated submersible vehicle that we can send down to it would be awesome if we can, and might write a grant for that next year. So this was something that just was really exceptional and the kind of thing we can't really do in our classroom. So that's what got us excited about it.
That's great. Thank you.
And a lot of the books have virtual investigations that we have access to, that's free. Like, well, except for Louster, but like that, I think was one that the other book we're considering. And we were like, wait, we already used this, so we already have access to all of those virtual investigations. Whereas this one was really tied directly to the curriculum and that unit and the phenomenon being presented.
And it's good to add, I believe McGraw-Hill, the Inspired Biology, was in the process of switching from one kind of lab to a vendor, a secondary vendor that's going to provide some online labs, but they didn't know which one. They couldn't tell us which one it was going to be. We didn't have examples of what it would look like. So not knowing that option compared to this kind of quality was really, hands down, led to this recommendation.
Thanks for your question. On the next slide, I just want to highlight a few other things that we really enjoyed about the book, especially as we learn more about some of their online capabilities in terms of meeting the needs of our students. We mentioned that the reading level was more appropriate than the other book, but in addition, on the ebook, you can press a button and it automatically lowers the reading level by 2 grade levels, which is essential, especially for our English language learners to be able to access that book. In addition, and with another click of the button, it will automatically read the textbook out loud to them in audio. It's integrated within Google Translate, so it can translate the book as well as read the book in different languages, many languages, as many as Google Translate has. Teachers have the ability to customize their content. They have access to class reports as well as analytics that they can use to kind of modify their teaching or address certain needs by some of the students. Which a lot of the textbooks will have the ability to, but that was important for us. The real world applications were great. I loved the phenomenon. I actually liked a lot of the topics in this book more so than some of the other ones. Like in one of them, it talks about the gut biome and the importance of it. And I know that's really an exciting, thing I like to talk about. I'm sure a lot of us do. And then also to help some of our students understand the text. It has pop-up definitions as well as it will help them pronounce the words if they need it. And then in the teacher book that they provide, they have 3 different levels that they can suggest in terms of modifications or ways you can change up teaching the curriculum to meet those 3 levels, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. And within their online textbook platform, you can group students up by whatever you need, like it could be individuals that maybe have some difficulty with reading the textbook. And so you can actually assign different like reading assignments or assessments specific to those groups. And that covers the same content that you want to cover. And so that ability just allows you to adapt what you need so that the students can be successful.
Is this on iPads or laptops or?
All of it. Phone, iPad, laptop.
What?
And so on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what we plan to do to implement this textbook if it is approved. We do hope to actually get an in-person meeting before the end of the school year. We would love as a biology group to be able to have more information, more understanding of the curriculum so that if they choose, we can spend some time over the summer kind of planning and getting to know the curriculum better so that we can come in the school year prepared. I've actually already talked to some of our instructional coaches on technology. Very possible that we can have the ability to meet as a group on the tech day. You'll also spend some more time collaborating and integrating the textbook and the curriculum into our courses. And then hopefully have a continued scheduled meeting as a group, as a biology group, just to kind of continue that collaboration and make it successful. Like we're done.
I had a few questions. So like maybe this was covered, but like, what's the rationale for a new textbook? 2, did we look at what other school districts, both public and private, are using for biology textbooks? And then an accounting question. Is this come for out of the general fund or is this a cap tech expenditure, at least for the technology piece? And then what is the overall like sum we're talking about for this textbook at all?
So our current textbook is, as I mentioned, it's about 12 years old. They aren't currently supporting any, I shouldn't say they're not supporting it, but the electronic version is out of date because they're coming out with a new textbook, this publisher. So they're not updating things there. And it's getting kind of harder. We're having to go year by year for the electronic version of the book we have now. We looked at the new version of the textbook that our current publisher is coming out with, and we did not think that it stacked up with some of the other textbooks. In fact, we didn't even have that in our top 4 choices for presentations. We looked around at local districts and many of them are using some of the other textbooks that we did look at. And this one, of course, is brand new, and this is going to be the first year for the National Geographic. So nobody else is using that currently, but the Cengage learning system, who's doing all the electronic stuff, is known. We have a couple of other departments have books using Cengage learning, and the company has a good reputation for good products that are usable, user-friendly. As for where the money's coming from, that is not a.
Oh, and then there's one about the textbook,
Okay.
sort of more of an accounting. So I saw that you can go down a couple grade levels, but I guess the opposite function isn't available. Can you go up a couple grade levels?
I
mean, because it does sort of like, you know, there's a difference, right? Like.
Well, the reading level is at 10.6 and most of the students in our 10th grade. So it is already kind of at the max reading level. But we had the students review it. They really enjoyed the way it was written. They thought it was engaging. That's some of the feedback we had. And we didn't, we just didn't see a need to have a higher reading level because the content is actually pretty rich. But we did actually send a message out in our national biology teaching committee. There's like massive numbers of biology teachers part of that. And we did actually ask what textbooks individuals were using and recommended. And that's where we actually got a National Geographic recommendation.
As far as the funding, that we'll braid this together. There will be a CapTech portion of this, which we've already met and talked about. There will also be a component from the schools foundation coming up. And so both the Breakfast of Champions and or All In for Kids next fall will be a big portion of this. So the general fund probably won't be paying for this text. It will be those two entities or those two funding sources. Total cost, I can't remember.
$67,000 with majority of that going to.
Is the licensing term, like, what's the standard?
6 years.
For 6 years.
And I actually think that the online textbook is not accessible after this year. I think they extended it. I think it was a Clay said, like,
It's gonna run out.
Your current,
yeah, currently, yeah. 2012.
We'll be without an
last year, this is the last year.
Right.
Thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate how you use all the diversity representation of practicing scientists as an important feature and to distinguish between the two selections. Because sometimes when we think about how do we infuse DI work into science, people's like, oh, it's just science. It's just like math is math, biology is biology. So the fact that you recognize how important it is to, on a visuals, you know, for them to see practicing scientists, I think it was another step to contribute to more of our students of color who would be to see themselves in this space. So I really appreciate
Really
that the group saw that as a really important thing. So then, part of the book that you chose, I'm curious as to how do they further, you know, let's say you talk about climate change, you talk about gut biology, all of that, right? Again, you can say, oh, science is science, it's all the same, everybody, but you know it's not, because based on our culture, our racial makeup, where we live, right? The ocean floor is different if you're on the islands or here. Does the book really, how does it provide kind of larger, you know, like it provides some basic information? Does it add another layer of like how to view it from more of a social justice or like interconnected kind of perspective to see how what we do here impacts maybe other places? All gut biology is not the same because of the different food we eat, the way that we're made of. Does it have that layer, or if not, do the teachers kind of add that layer to your teaching?
Well, I know it does with climate change. So it talks about climate change effects in different regions of the world. I mean, all teachers, we've always integrated various other things to bring in that different cultural aspect, but I know you're about to.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say that it actually does deal with issues like that. And in fact, one of the things I noticed about all of these new books is that as they're incorporating the next generation science standards, part of those standards is that interaction between science and society and the fact that they influence each other. The kinds of questions we ask are based on culture and things like that. So that is actually an element that's built right into the book. It has a number of things, all of the books that we looked at, which I thought actually did a very good job of something that I agree that has been overlooked in the past. And then in addition, we already do we bring in a lot of things. And I would make the comment that traditionally, you know, I've been teaching here for a while, we don't really teach out of the book. We never really have. The book has been more of a resource. I think that with this new book, it aligns really well. One of the things we like, it aligns with what we already do. So for example, we start with ecology, whereas most books kind of start with the cell. But this book starts with ecology. So we may, I think I'll find myself maybe doing a unit, maybe this first unit, kind of out of the book and changing up what I do a little bit. But there's so many things that we've been doing for a long time, and many of it looking at some of the social justice issues, equity issues, how science and society interacts. And there's no way that we'll stop doing those things, so. But I think that's a really wonderful question to ask and an important one, so.
I appreciate you all doing the work
Thank you.
even before the books come out. Ahead of our curve, yeah.
Andrew?
The book definitely needed an update. Not very- Needed an update, so, anything is better than, I feel like maybe the book that I remember reading during online, school, so I appreciate I remember the online piece being clunky and, really not fantastic. So this one, I haven't had time to look at it, but the students, I was just reading briefly on the Google Sheets what the students said, and I appreciated that you involve students and that they were able to have time to really look at it. So it looks great.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I didn't even know National Geographic was in this like educational publishing space. I think that's really exciting because I follow all their social media and they have such like a wealth of material available. So it's cool if students are able to.
And they're gonna keep expanding
Right.
a lot of the online like videos.
There's always some new stuff. Yeah, which is great. I also really appreciate that making it more accessible to students who are like maybe English language learners or slower readers or what, or more auditory learners or whatever. Like, that's just great to make this more available. I talk about this all day. I have a degree in sociology. But yeah, thank you very much for all that.
Drop in anytime.
I will.
Our sixth grade social studies adopted 4 years ago now, in Cengage, when they were first getting into the market. And so we've had it on the social studies side, now we have side, and we have two others at the high school,
I think so.
right?
Not this time, yeah.
And your labs, hands-on labs, they're independent of the book or?
They have recommended ones that correlate with the units, which we, will look into and have modified based on what we're already doing. We always try to incorporate things, hands-on labs, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what we do does tie in well with, and honestly would with any textbook, because it's a question of learning the topics and the concepts, which are pretty standard throughout the books, however they might be organized. So that's not an issue. We'll easily be able to integrate the labs that we do already into the curriculum, and we may look for some new things as well.
Sure. And problem sets and tests, they come from the book,
They have a test generator, yes.
but you have your own, or do you use the ones from the publisher?
But again, I've never really taught out of a textbook, so
Yeah.
generally created my own materials. Most of the other teachers have as well, but we do appreciate having the ability to add some new things to what we're already doing.
Sure.
And this one has access to a bank of questions you can select, and then you can just press a button, and then it will all create like many different versions by mixing up the questions in order. Which is great when you're trying to do like, different classes and.
Yeah,
And then you can just have like a group of different questions and you can be like, all right, well, for the retake or whatever, you can just choose these instead of these. It covers the same content.
And all the textbooks, I think, also have a fairly new tool. That you can, if you do like a reading quiz online or a quiz of whatever content online, the students can complete that within the app or within the textbook, and then you automatically get data analysis of their answers, and you can use that to make judgments about how to support certain students or certain groups of students, and those will be things we'll want to explore as well.
And it gives automatic feedback to the students as well.
thank you. Any other questions? People okay with putting this on the consent agenda for next time? Okay,
Great.
Thank you very much.
So
You
any
want me to talk about the AP biology book at all?
overview piece? Yes, that'd be great.
Sure. So currently in AP biology, we use the Campbell biology book, which is a fairly standard biology textbook. The one we used is one edition later than the book that I used in biology in college as an undergraduate. It has not been updated in quite some time. We're definitely due. I've gotten a couple of emails recently about the textbook when some parents noticed the publication date. So again, we don't teach the class out of the textbook, but we definitely could use a book that covers at least the last decade of information. So this is the latest edition, 12th edition of the book. We're currently using 5th edition of the book. Unlike the 10th grade biology book, Campbell biology just keeps getting bigger and thicker and heavier. It's I think it qualifies as a deadly weapon at this point. But it's a wonderful textbook. It's definitely college, and in fact, a lot of college courses, it's kind of the standard textbook for their intro level biology. It's jam-packed with information. They have reorganized it a little bit and wonderful diagrams. I think it's an excellent book, and it's a great resource for students. But the nice thing, this covers things like CRISPR, which is a DNA modification technology. It's relatively new, so it's got things like that in there that you know, we don't have in our current textbook. So very excited to be able to update the book.
Just for the record, I used Campbell for AP biology in 1988. It
Yeah.
was published in 87.
Yes, that's current one.
For the record, I like hard heavy text.
You would love this.
Any other questions?
There's no online
Yeah.
version of it.
No, I mean, they have an online that we have, but it's totally separate, unlike this book where it's kind of built in that you can get the physical book and the online simultaneously, and it's not the same kind of an online support. It's just some additional readings. It's not super useful, so unfortunately, yeah.
I was gonna ask that, I mean, are students still using the textbooks
Are they still,
as opposed to the online?
in 10th grade, you mean?
Well, I just mean in general, I mean, we spend all this money. And certainly not that we do away with them, but we spend all this money to make sure that every student has one, but I don't know, in my house, they get checked out and go sit in the closet until they return them.
Right. That is a wonderful question. You know, I'm amazed actually at how many students, you know, for example, this year, last couple of years, every submission is electronic on Schoology, yet I still have to print out copies of everything because of all the kids that like to handwrite. So I'm thinking that we're still kind of almost half and half with people who want to have a physical book. But I agree, textbooks especially, it's definitely kind of moving online.
The Spanish, actually both French and Spanish, we only purchased classroom sets. That's what they chose to do, because they wanted them accessible to do in the classroom, but then students weren't taking them with them as much. And so it seems to be kind of a split based on, you know, student needs and what they wanted. So the other piece is that for those online texts, they've gone to basically a pricing model where if you pay for the online, you pretty much get the book for $5 kind of thing. So you're not paying double cost. And so the way that they've structured the pricing is basically, it doesn't make sense not to at least just get the books as you go, just the way.
Yeah, you don't save very much money if you just buy the e-version.
I mean, this is not a board vote or anything, but I would like to, if we can, I would like to keep as many books as possible. And I mean, there's so much research that says that students actually retain so much more when they read from a book versus online. I know accessibility is so important. But like, how do we also make sure that our students, we spend time to teach them to read and touch the book so that they have more of that connection? Because as we move totally towards online, I just feel like they're losing a lot of, they're not absorbing content the same way. And so in the way that we teach, it would really be important that we retain, even if we spend an extra $5, I really appreciate that we spend an extra $5. I would vote anytime for that. But yeah, so balancing between best kind of teaching practice with accessibility. Right.
Yeah, I was just gonna say to like build on that for accessibility, speaking from like personal experience, for me, like a textbook is very important to like sort of situate myself and be able to like flip back and forth.
Right.
And I don't digest information in the same way, like, and I like electronic tools for like a different way to like see information, but hard copy is still very important. And so I think just be mindful of that in textbook adoption, to know that like, you know, different learners will have different ways. And for some, a physical textbook, as antiquated as it may seem and anachronistic, is very important.
I agree.
I just haven't touched the book every day.
Any other questions? With that, I think we're done with review. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move to full governance process monitoring, number 3A, fundamental 5, like equity and inclusion.
Great. I will bring up Director Booby as well as members from the high school, middle school, and elementary for our fundamental 5 update. As they come up, as you might remember, we pushed fundamental 4, that's going to come back in May. We kept fundamental 5 in this position. This is taking a look at diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I think so much of what we've been trying to work on as a school district, particularly in the last few years, is making sure that this becomes a lens with which we're looking through so many aspects of our district, in fact, all aspects of the district. I think the conversation you just had with the teachers illustrates that in terms of how do we select tests and looking at that. But this is our opportunity to come to the board once a year and really separate out aspects of fundamental 5 and take a look at some qualitative indicators as well as quantitative indicators of how are we doing and what does our district look like in 2023 as we are thinking about our students and broadcasting their voice, removing barriers, certainly developing that sense of belonging, and ultimately ensuring that all of our students believe in themselves and we believe in them. So I will turn it over to Dr. Booby to launch Fundamental 5 and our team.
All right, well, I'll get us started. The quantitative indicators, we look at a breakdown of just race and ethnicity to begin with. We can tell over the last 6 years, we are becoming a more and more diverse population. Taking a look at even like 2 or more races have gone from 9% to almost 14%. Our Asian population has grown by 6%. And our white Caucasian population has decreased from 63.8 to 50.9, so that we can see that we are becoming more diverse. If you look at our incoming kindergartners or first graders versus our exiting seniors, 11th and 12th graders in the next chart, Andrews, you can see that our incoming students in the bottom 2 grades are more diverse than our exiting students. So we're going to continue this trend of becoming a more diverse island. And our gender demographics are staying relatively stable. And we're reporting gender X, I think, for the first time this year. And again, as students disclose, if they choose to, that would be reported. And so, ELL, do we have NOVA today?
So this is given every other year.
Okay.
And so is Nova online by any chance? I don't know if we have anything to add. The survey is given every other year. This is our off year for that. In terms of the survey data from our families. As we look for that, just some things we've been looking at a little bit from our district demographics. The state about 1.5 years ago went to a new system that allows families to identify not just according to the federal race categories, but all of them. And when you look at our students we have 95 different race categories or race identities from our students. And then when you break that down into the multiple races that they might identify as. We have 5,293 different racial identities in our school district. As we go to the language piece, we have 54 different languages that are identified by families that are spoken in our district as well. Chinese, Korean, Russian, Vietnamese, and Japanese are top 5 besides English. But I think it's important to remember that even our language diversity has continued to expand as well.
Thank you. Jamie, did you want to chime in? How was it difficult to do that? I mean, I can speak to it briefly, just to say that, you know, we don't have a quota. We look at the demographic data. We're relatively close on male, female identification. We are slightly overrepresented based on district enrollment comparison in our Asian students, and slightly under for those identified as white. But again, we don't have a specific number or quota. That's just informational. That's it.
Thank you, Jamie. And moving on, special services, you can see students receiving 504 bilingual education services or special services, and what their enrollment is in honors or AP classes. And so that is reported. What is not on this report this year is that over the last 4 years, we've actually increased our inclusionary packages by 15%. So students are actually having more and more access each year to the classes, just to the genetic curriculum altogether. And so I anticipate, as we continue to move this upward trend of more inclusionary practices, that we will see more and more students excelling into other domains.
And typically, in looking at our bilingual education services, and then access to courses, remembering that many of our students spend fewer years in what we call level 1, 2, and 3 in our district than in other school districts. That's both because of the support they receive in schools, but also the supports that we know that they're receiving at home, in families. And so, you know, typically we only have between 10 and 20 students who are actually receiving services for EL. I'm not sure what it is. Do we know how many students are qualifying exactly this year? It's probably around 20 is usually what it is. So, even though they may not be accessing it as a 9th grader, by the time they're 12th graders, many of them move beyond, and they come in typically level 3, level 4, level 5 is where they top out and then become fully immersed and out of services.
I'm going to skip over the athletic data because I'll let the grade levels talk about that as they present. The discipline data is on page 11. We did have in the 21-22 school year an uptick in discipline data as we were coming back from COVID. And as I look at the data, which isn't reported in here, several students were repeats, and several pieces of it were mental health and other related to other issues going on that. And as I look at the names, I can see that they've all received extra support and services to help them with what was going on in their lives at the time. So the numbers don't always report the success stories or what's happening in the family's lives, but just note that it's only disproportional in the white. But again, I think that kind of is an anomaly here. All right, who would like to present?
So Megan wants.
Megan's starting.
Let's go, elementary. Excuse me. So, you know, I'm excited to be here on behalf of the elementary team tonight, just to share with you around the work that we're doing. I don't mean to be cheesy when I say this, but honestly, like in the elementary level, the work around equity and inclusion and diversity is really woven into everything we're doing, day to day and classroom by classroom, school level. I was thinking even just today, we had 2 hours of late start, but within this day alone, I had opportunity to work with the family on, modifications and things we could do for her son with, dyslexia and other learning needs. We had our E-car, group from the high school come over and give presentations around Asian American history and culture to our 4th and 5th graders. We had the IDEA project, which is around disability awareness and empathy, in our school building all week, with all of our classes rotating through and about 50 parent volunteers being a part of that process. I had a conversation with another family about how we can advocate for her trans son and members of the LGBTQ community within our schools and allies for those kids. So like this is just today in one elementary school, let alone all of the other examples of our teachers who are making sure the texts represent our students. Our librarian doing the same thing in the collections that she's building. Conversations in our PLCs and our equity book study groups and our equity teams that really thread through how we're looking at our curriculum and how we're representing students in our school and making sure that all students are all of our kids. Sue Ann mentioned the level of inclusion that's been growing over time, and that all of our kids are seen as valuable members of the community, regardless of what services they receive. So you'll see all of the examples listed in here as well. I didn't want to just read out for you all of the ways that we are incorporating this, but I do really feel, you know, with our social emotional learning curriculum and opportunities for our students to really see and experience their selves and see all of them, you know, every day for their strengths, needs, interests. It's a part of, I think, a privilege that we have in elementary school to have kids for 6 years and teachers who, you know, we had the E-card back today and a lot of it, almost all the kids had gone to West Mercer. Like I will say like 75% of them.
Oh, just.
They all had, like, a lot of them had. And
This is best, there.
that well. To the owl or people online, yeah. But just to say that, you know, the relationships that teachers get to have with students over time and building in that, like, just that culture of inclusion across the grade levels and seeing their kids back in the classroom. One of our teachers, I could tell, was like kind of getting emotional seeing an old student come back and present. But yeah, we're just doing a lot of incredible work, and I know we're at the beginning of finding ways to partner and making sure that we're doing so with our students and families and staff all together. You know, I'm a part of the SEAC group with Fred, and we've been able to bring a lot of those groups together, students and families and community partners, to really try to look at what are the barriers that we need to address in our community still, and be unapologetic in doing that, even when it's hard. So I know that was pretty general. You have all of the other stories and highlights in here from the schools. And I, you know, on behalf of Julie, John, Heidi, and myself, just know that we're really strong advocates for all of our kids, and we know that our teachers are as well, and our families, and equity means that our kids get what they need. All of our kids get what they need. And that can look across the spectrum in all of the ways. So come by anytime. I know some of you got to visit West this year, and it was a really nice time to have a visit and share with our kids. So please come back anytime, and let's hear what the middle school's doing.
Real quickly, my
Yeah.
daughter's a 5th grader at West Mercer, and she mentioned that students from the high school came and spoke about the international district. So thank you for that. Like, I think one of the unique things about our district that we see, you know, from time to time, whether it's band or like now, you know, with IDEA about how to have these linkages across schools has a big impression. Like, I think particularly in elementary and middle school, when like when it makes sense, you know, to have the high schoolers come in. And I like to hear these examples and stories. And also is one of the things that makes, you know, our district, I think, unique and special. So thank you.
That was all flexibility at the last moment too, because we had the 2-hour delay and just because.
Oh, yeah.
For a while, and so there was this last minute, late last night, and kids going, are we still on?
No, we're still on. You keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't let a little water shortage stop us. But we're appreciating our water.
We are.
Yes. Yeah, welcome any questions that you have as well, so, or any feedback.
Any questions from the group? Andrew?
I mean, just adding on, I think with our superintendent student advisory group, just those connections with working with the fifth graders and at all four schools, being able to connect with middle school and high schoolers and work on student voice is great, and continue to build that is great. So it's, you know, it's always a highlight to hear from the fifth graders and middle school and high schoolers what's going on and what we can all share and what we can all work on at our own school. So I think it's really kind of a cool moment for some of our high schoolers to work with elementary students and mentor them, and for our elementary students to learn from the high schoolers. So it's really great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the VSU has had a really great connection with our elementary school kids all year as well. Setting up some times for them to meet and plan and organize events together. And that was really a big push from our PTA, DEI liaison and the VSU advisors and that team. So just finding ways for our kids to connect with one another and see themselves and other students and peers and older peers has been very powerful for not just our kids, but their families who've attended these events too. So it's been good.
I know we had National Holocaust Remembrance Day on Tuesday, and I drive by the schools, and I know our high school team has come down to the elementaries to plant daffodils in the fall as part of the daffodil project, and now the daffodils are coming up. So when you're driving through and you see the school, you think you see the daffodils and you see what that is, but then you think about the connection between our students. High school to elementary is really unique.
Well, and our middle schoolers, not to be left out, volunteered and, walked down to Lake Ridge to help with the idea project there as well. So, we had a dozen or so kids that left our building to go support in that building. So it definitely happens, and BSU has been down. We often have the cheerleaders and the drill and, the softball coach and coming to make interactions with our kids too. So it is, we also exist in the middle there. So that's.
Bill,
I want to say ditto to everything that Megan said, because I wrote, our teachers and staff are living into this fundamental all of the time. And I really think about it in three ways. In our instruction and our content, and I think you can see in all of the examples there, our teachers truly think about who our kids are in front of us, and then they think about what is the content and how does it best reflect who those kids are. And I think you see that in all the examples. So one of the new examples this year was our IMS orchestra, and I just thought both the things that she shared were pretty amazing, but also very representative of how our teachers are thinking about the work with our kids. One was their Around the World themed concert, so really looking at who the kids are in the orchestra and spotlighting songs from those cultures that are represented, and then kids themselves were introducing the songs and making connections to who they are. So the role of the student voice is just super powerful. And she also talks about how they really look to diversify the people who work with our kids in music to make sure that they are representative. They talk specifically about the coaches, the adjudicators, the clinicians, and the artists, and how they represent women, how they represent LGBTQA. And so I think that's amazing. And our BIPOC communities, that they're really thinking about who we're putting in front of our kids that mirror who our kids are. And then lastly, also in orchestra, if you had the opportunity at Showcase to listen to our sixth graders play, they partnered with the Muckleshoot tribe, and the Muckleshoot tribe actually created the song that was borrowed by our sixth graders. And that was a really important word, this idea that it wasn't our music to hold, but it was an honor to play. And then we returned that music back to the tribe, and they performed with our group. And it was really important learning for our kids, and super valuable. And I think that goes to the instruction and the content content development that our teachers are really working towards, and you see that throughout all of our examples. You can see that through the universal design for learning, where our teachers are considering the resources that our kids need access to, and then providing it as an option for any kid to access. Back to those inclusionary practices that Dr. Booty talked about as well, our 4 mindsets that are being integrated and implemented all of the time. So the second piece that I really think about is assessment. And one of the pieces that we're really working hard around this year is the idea of how do we gather and use kids to help us gather evidence to demonstrate learning, so that it doesn't always reflect in one way. It's not always about a final product, a final test, a quiz. That's not the only way kids can show learning. So how is it that we can be creative in our evidence collection and help kids see that they can demonstrate their learning in a conversation that we have in the classroom, through that process of learning and the implementation of repeating a skill multiple times. So that's something that we're really digging deeply into in this spring. And then the last one is around culture. And the middle school is a funny place. You know, we have amazing humans in our building, amazing, from our staff to our students to our community. And we are challenged with the lack of brain development and the power of the group that sometimes outweighs the soul and the human that is there. So we are really thinking about how we can grow the phenomenal climate that happens in every classroom and carry that in a more continuous way into the halls and into the lunchroom. And how do we help our kids be the incredible people that they are in the times when no one's looking, or when they think it's more important to impress their friends than it is to lift up another human. So to that end, we're really looking at our data. We ask our teachers to fill out what we call a bias reporting form. So when they see and engage and disrupt bias, we ask them to report that. Our kids are reporting through our Say Something app. They are reporting those situations, and then also typically through our parents, we get 3207 and 3210 reports of bullying, harassment, or discrimination. So we're really looking at that data. Just yesterday, we looked at that data with our JOMI partners, our Jewish on Mercer Island partners. We looked at that data with our Just Community partners, and we're going to look at that data as a staff as well, really trying to think about how we can disrupt what is happening and continue our education, our communication, and our resources to kids, to families, and to teachers, so that we can help keep building the incredible kids that we have, but also really recognize and confront when they make a mistake, and how we can keep helping them. So that's kind of how I see it at the middle school.
Any questions?
I love that when you mentioned all of the things that you're working on, and I know that culture especially is very difficult. And I was wondering, sometimes when we teach, when they come to, we teach them content and knowledge, and and like you said, within the classroom, there's a lot of connection, or within the affinity group, which I'm really a proponent for, because you have to have a safe space before you can explore out. But my son was really, Oliver was involved in the cooperative PE. And I think until he participated in that, he's a cool kid with everybody, but, developmentally, you're not all there. But I see him fundamentally change really once he participates in something that is a little bit beyond his comfort level, not within his peer athlete groups, right? And so especially during COVID, I wonder how we have all these we have structures like classroom that builds a relationship, we have affinity groups, but as with COVID, more of the cooperative PE, how do we intentionally facilitate more connections of differences, more towards a common goal, a common project, So it's a little bit more an application of what we learn. And I wonder if school has to kind of go towards a little bit more of that intentional facilitation. You know, versus let them find themselves, because they're finding themselves within affinity groups, which is great. But then it's like they need a little bit more pushing and prodding, just like, you know, it took me like at least 5 times, a lot of negotiating, a lot of threatening, and ultimately I'm like, hey, can you call in? Like, yeah, call her directly. Yes, and so, but when they do it, it's magical, right? And so, yeah, I'm just like kind of when you're thinking about how do we do that, and part of it, I wonder, is more of an intentional facilitation.
Yeah.
Connection of our students.
I love that. And for those of you who don't know, Director Din is talking about our cooperative PE course, which integrates our students who have more intensive physical needs and our more typical peers who are supporting and playing PE together. And it's a pretty phenomenal experience. We also have many students, 50 or so, that throughout the year serve as student mentors. I know some of your children have done that, who again act as a peer mentor within a learning environment in support of some of our students. And our kids, when they have those experiences, you're right, they do. And we try to provide other experiences. We always do a thing called Mix It Up Day. And it might be, and Andrew, I don't know if you remember, but it might be the most uncomfortable day on campus ever. Because what we ask is at lunch for kids to actually sit somewhere with somebody they don't know and have a conversation, and it is brutal. I mean, brutal. So really trying to think about how to do those things in small, smaller pockets where it's the risk isn't as massive in order to make some reward, so continuing to think about how we do that. Our sources of strength did a video or an activity at lunch where it was, come up and take pictures and show that you belong. But it is me with my group of friends who mostly look like me, going up there, but then trying to put that together in a compilation so we see that the whole is important too. But yeah, I couldn't agree with your point more.
I was just gonna say, like, in terms of intentional facilitation, I think, like, part of that is dependent upon like the space and the opportunity, and thinking to 5th grade camp. Like there was a vignette that like sort of, I think, represented the opportunity of these 2 5th grade boys. They're very different physically. One looks very, very tall and quite, strong for a 5th grader. The other, like one of the shortest 5th graders. One is a little bit more disruptive. The other is very easygoing and gets along, with many different types. And they were on opposite ends of a log, sawing, with one pulling and then the other, and sort of teamwork. And I think, like what's needed sometimes is, those opportunities and those spaces in order to get people sort of out of students or anyone out of their like usual comfort zone and sort of forge and find those bonds.
Just a couple of like kind of brain popcorning thoughts to share, experiences to share. One is that a million years ago, I was an occupational therapist in North Shore. And at the school that I worked at, you had to apply to be a peer mentor, and it was considered like a big honor to become one. And those kids got special privileges that the other kids did not get. And so just like, I was really impressed because the culture on the playground there was like, everybody played with everybody. I never saw a single instance of any of my clients being like excluded or hassled or whatever. And I just thought, wow, like they have done a really good job. So that was one thought. And the other was just, I attended a conference a few years ago where everybody was given a certain number of tickets, and you were supposed to give one of the tickets to somebody who did something good. Like they were click tickets, and you were supposed to give them to someone who would like raise their hand and been brave or like done something nice for someone. And people who got the tickets could put their names on and put them in a big fishbowl, and they did a drawing every day of the conference. And I got to tell you that by the end of the 4 days, everyone was being so nice and helpful. Yeah, that was a really, and you could just give a ticket for someone coming up and talking to you. I don't know how you keep it from being very like incestuous and people just giving tickets to their friends. You have to figure out a way around that.
Can I make a point? What you
Yeah.
said, when you were talking, it makes me think that, so I often ask my kids, like, are there a lot of bullying in school? And they're just like, no, it's more stuff. But I think what exists a lot, and sometimes is hard to see, are people who are excluded. So it's sometimes, we see this disciplinary problems and we see kind of overt, behavior. But we often don't see the kids who are quiet and not involved and excluded. And so that's, and maybe on Marshall Island, that's more common. Maybe the type of students that we have and, just kind of the nature of our socioeconomic area. So just kind of, how do we, do things that pull people in? Because sometimes just looking at like kind of physical meanness or it's just seeing one side, right? As I'm looking at some of this data, we just see one side. We don't see those who are not fully belonging or feeling more excluded.
Well, along those same lines, that's amazing. And our teachers are so phenomenal at that. And one of the inclusive strategies, or one of the strategies our teachers are working on is one-on-one conferencing with kids. And just today, a teacher had a one-on-one conference for about 15 minutes with a student who shared with her that he felt invisible. And then immediately the teacher shared that with the counselor. The counselor was meeting with that student by 6th period today. And we're, thinking about how can we draw those connections? Who can we build relationship with? And so, coming back to these incredible instructional practices, because our teachers care so deeply, they've really shifted how they do things. They're taking time to talk to kids and listen, not that they didn't always, but really prioritizing that. And then building that network. So it's awesome.
I'm really happy to hear that you guys are so on the issue of like potential, racial slurs, et cetera, kind of thing. Like, because when I ran for school board in 2019, that was one of the complaints that I heard the most from parents, was that they felt like if their kid just was like, trash talked or might have been racial, might have been religious, might have been something else, that there wasn't a comprehensive response. Like somebody might talk to the student might get sent to the principal's office, but there wasn't like a sort of systemic attempt to change those behaviors. So that's great.
Yeah, we're working really hard at it. We are nowhere near like celebrating perfection. We have so much growth to make. But we care about it. We're working on it. We're looking at it.
I've enjoyed listening to this conversation and, I appreciate that it just especially at the middle school and brain development and, it's new kids every year and each kid deserves the opportunity to learn and to make mistakes and to learn, right? Hopefully the impact isn't huge on others, but so perfection is never going to be, but the fact that you're doing it and aware of it. And I think that's the goal, is that it's happening. And we're never going to reach perfect because of all of those other issues, but thank you for doing it. And I don't know how you middle schoolers do it.
I think we heard bits and pieces of this when we met with the South Asian families, and one of the words that they were using were things like, we want to know that our teachers are empowered to intervene. And I was having another conversation with a parent who was there at that meeting, and then some follow-up pieces, just thinking about, sometimes I think we're having cross conversations where a student's perception is something, the aggressor's perception, the teacher's perception, how does it get resolved? If I don't know that it got resolved, then I think nothing happened and I go home and I'm upset. But I think, Mary Jo, we've had lots of conversations that we're not perfect yet. And, we know it starts in kindergarten. The education process for some, and some of us arrived to here in 3rd grade or wherever they arrive, we have to just start swimming and really start working together. But, I think there's some threads from that meeting.
Yeah, certainly. And I think it also echoes what Jack talked about inclusion and belonging, and it's easy to hide sometimes. Appreciate it.
High school.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, Fundamental 5 is alive at all 3 levels. So we are excited to talk about our work at the high school around diversity, equity, and inclusive practices. If you recall from the fall, much of our school improvement plan was based around, much of the data around, fundamental 5, things that we pulled out of EES and grade distribution, around, students of color and some of the inequities that we saw in our school. And some of the distribution of the data on page 7 as well, that we're aggressively attacking these data points in our school, in our system. We have some very specific things that we're working on at the high school. And so Erica is going to talk a little bit about those specific areas.
Thank you, Ms. Rold. And I think so much of what we're able to do at the high school is because of the hard work that's been going on for so long. So thank you, and thank you to the whole board as well. One piece that I just want to acknowledge, we have this race and literature class, and it started the second year, and we've had one class, and next year we're going to offer 2 classes. So I think that's a really powerful piece to just share. And based on the work we want to do around our SIP, the focus on creating belonging and removing barriers has been a really key piece of what we want to do with staff, and really supporting our multilingual learners, supporting our students receiving special services, really focusing on having courageous conversations when we talk about how do we empower staff to have those conversations and to disrupt. That's been a key piece of what we're doing this year. And learning more about supporting our students around gender, sexuality. So very intentional about that work with staff. There's a lot of information, as we've all shared in the report, that can look at about what we're doing there. But in our work with staff is really giving them resources that they can use right away to work with students and in their classes. There's a couple of key celebrations that I just wanted to talk about that our students have been doing some amazing things, and this is all about the students and the advisors. I'd say our Black Student Union, our Student Voices for Change, they're focused on creating a sense of belonging and removing barriers, particularly for our students of color, has been it's changed the culture of our school and needs to continue to keep changing it. But a couple of the highlights, they've created a BSU curriculum repository for our staff. We had our first BSU family dinner this year that was island-wide. We created a BSU documentary that was shown at elementary school, brought in Ijeoma Oluo, and she spoke to both staff and students about creating a sense of belonging and removing barriers for our students of color. We had a 21-day equity challenge that was for both students and staff. We showed Race to Be Human to both students and staff, and had a panel reflection. And the other one that I really wanted to highlight is our ECAR group. The night market that they put on was just phenomenal, and as a celebration to honor our AAPI community, and students orchestrated vendors. There's food, they sold cookbooks that they made, there's games, activities. There are over 400 people that attended, and we could just see this is going to be something that will continue. But I just, again, want to really honor the students and their voices, and want to keep broadcasting that, the advisors, and how we'll continue to keep that focus on making a difference for belonging through racial and social justice for those challenges.
Yeah, and you heard from the other levels of our students being infused into many of the schools programs and so forth. And I think you'll see in many of the work that we did and the specifics that are in our board report, we're trying to bring our community partners as well. So you'll see the work that we've done with Parent Edge, with our PPSA, with MIYFS, and of course, our staff partnerships, MIDA, et cetera. We've really spent some time kind of capturing, again, what Dan said earlier around what makes our community so special and unique, that we can do this through community partnerships, through our different levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. It makes it special. Oh, I also wanted to comment on.
Yes, we're gonna go back to the athletic data.
Okay. Thanks,
Right.
Jen. Yeah, I was gonna hit it right now. I
Yes.
just was gonna make one quick comment, since it is a part of our board report and fundamental 5. If you look at our distribution of our gender participation numbers and so forth too, one thing I want to just make sure and comment when this was created, we haven't put in spring sports data inside of this number yet. So you'll see a huge distribution of numbers and a percentage that is quite significant off as far as boys and girls participating. The spring is crazy for female participation. I think last year we had 220 students, female students participate in athletics. So you're gonna see these numbers in our distribution for boys and girls participating in sports change drastically once our spring sports are put in. And so those are large numbers that you'll see updated over the next month or so.
Thank you. We're running a little behind schedule, so any questions from board members?
I want,
Sure.
you know, I want to also reiterate, Deborah's comment on like, ultimately, we're an education system, students are here to learn. And how do we balance that, allowing them to make mistakes? I think that's really important. But always striving, right? I don't think we should aim for perfection. That's kind of a weird human being. And, you know, and also set up a real unrealistic expectation, but we're just doing the best we can with what we have, right? And allowing our students to make mistakes over and over again. And so hearing all the wonderful things that are being done, and then I'm seeing the parent survey data just kind of, and I know it's a pandemic time when they're filling this out, but I guess what we're doing in the classroom, how is it not translating to somehow parents feel that all these things are being done and what can we do better? So kind of like some insight about that, about where do you think that's happening and what can we do better to increase these parent survey data?
I think it's starting to happen and I appreciate that too. I think, at least for me, seeing the, actually reading our counselor and principal newsletters where they're highlighting, achievements and things that our students are doing. And, it's just the number of emails, but I tell everybody, if you're gonna read two things, read your principal newsletter and read the counselor's newsletters, because it's got all the info in. So anyways, it's got all the information and what I'm really seeing, and maybe it's just because I know these peers as they're getting older and older, but they're reaching out and they're making statements and they're learning. And it's been really fun to watch them. And then also, to be able to see the highlights and see the ones that I don't necessarily know personally, but the things that our students are doing in our community and then in the greater community and even national community, they're doing really good things. And I think that, with Tam's point in terms of, there is a disconnect because we only think that we only think what is happening if we know about it, right? And so to be able to, with all of the posts, the social media usage and the newsletters to highlight what our students are doing. I would love to also see what our staff is doing because I know our staff is out there, doing some great things too. And that way once we know what everyone is doing, I think the perception, changes because it's happening. It's just a matter of are we aware of it?
I think that's why, I've been trying to use amplify, elevate, and thrive. How do we amplify what we're doing and tell that story? Then how do we elevate the things that we are doing and get even better so that we can help our whole organization thrive? And that amplification, we're gonna have to keep working on as we think about marketing our schools. And it's not because there isn't any shortage of stories, that's for sure. And I think Ian has done an incredible job with really trying to help with that. But continuing to do that and not be afraid to tell great things about ourselves as a school district. Because we've got staff members doing amazing things. Sometimes we never hear about them. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, we need to tell that story.
Thank you very much. There's action on this for the board. So do I have a motion to find the superintendent in compliance with Fundamental 5?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Andrew?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
Against? 0. So it would be 1-0 and 5-0 in favor of superintendent in compliance with Fundamental 5. Thank you so much for your work. And thank you for threading this through everything we do. Most appreciated. Okay. How you guys doing?
Oh,
So I was like, oh, give my. Problem with I know that's why that's. I guess we do the northern part. Yeah.
That makes me mad for fixing out the tap.
No, the tap water. That really kind of goes on. Yeah.
I'm doing all that. I'm doing water.
Not brown, scar. But I think my leg is sharp. And the rest of the. Yeah, don't do long, don't, I mean, hopefully you're on butter in there and one, but you don't.
Makes you longer. Yeah, I did all that. I didn't, I walked there.
And Washington.
Just cleaning my car, I'm really doing the.
Shall we get home from softball going yesterday? She's ready to shower, I'm like, oh, yeah. Yeah. Maybe not a 45-minute shower like normal.
That might be expensive.
Our water bill is out of control. Totally out.
Our family was too old and everything. I had like. You know, more was like, I'm not going to shower. But like.
Beautiful.
That's.
Well, your book? No, I just want.
I mean, okay.
Rose, do you want to still go? If you're the only one.
Let's continue. So, Fred, 4A, recognitions.
Fantastic. I want to begin with a recognition. Our journalism students participated in the Washington Journalism Education Association State Conference. I believe it was more regional this year, Mount Lake Terrace this year, I think the host. We had 7 high school students receive awards in a number of different areas. And Brooks Kasai is here tonight for sports photography. Won an award of excellence. If you ever have attended the sporting events, you see Brooks out there on sidelines of courts and through fences for some of our athletic teams. But we also had our very own Asha Warner, who is with us tonight, but news writing. She won a Superior Award for news writing. Taylor Holzhauser, newspaper layout, honorable mention. And Kyle Gerstle, review writing, won an award of excellence. And then on our yearbook side, we had Cameron Mustalier and Dahlia Usman, yearbook layout honorable mention award winners, Molly Rojas, sports photography, and Charlie Park, feature photography, honorable mention. So Brooks, I know journalism has been a passion of yours for a number of years, and just a couple moments if you want to talk about your career in journalism, and then a little bit about you and where you're heading next.
Yeah, so I have been in my school's journalism program since I was a freshman, actually. I started out as a staff writer, and my first article, I got to write it 3 weeks into the class. I got to work with some of our senior editors at the time, and I went to a climate strike for Seattle at the time. I went to Capitol Hill and I got to spend the day there, and that was the first time that I got to explore journalistic photography, and I got to shadow some of the older editors, and that was when I really realized that that was what I kind of could be good at. That was like that could be my contribution to journalism, to the newspaper at the high school. So when COVID hit, and then I became a sophomore, I decided that that was the role that I wanted to play when Mr. Twombly, our teacher and advisor, asked me what I wanted to do as an editor, what role would I want. So I started out as a photography editor and a back page editor. And there wasn't much I could do, given the restrictions of COVID the first year. So last year was really the first time that I got to really
get a feel for what that position would be like, going to different sporting events, taking photos for feature events, a variety of different things that I could do and be a part of. And also getting to train staff writers in person myself in photography, and that getting to see them improve their skills in photography. It's been amazing. And I've been able to do that for the last 2 years, and I'm glad that I was a part of it, and it's just been amazing to see the newspaper grow in my 4 years here.
Congratulations on that award.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so much.
Do you want to do a photo, or we can even wait till Asha comes back or a different time? But Brooks, thanks for being here tonight. Congratulations. I also want to honor National Student Leadership Week, which will be next week, which is really appropriate because you'll have a chance as a board to be with our superintendent student advisory next week, in addition to our PTA. So Andrew and Asha are working hard to kind of collate and bring together lots of great questions they have. The format we're going to do is a little different on that one. We will have our students all here, and we're going to do kind of an intro. And then we're going to split into 5 different groups so that each of you can be with a small subgroup of our superintendent student advisory and have a more of a conversation. And then we'll come back together and they'll be able to ask questions. You can ask questions of them. So looking forward to that next week. And go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, I said it's gonna be a lot of fun. I had it in my report, but you just covered it.
Oh,
so-
darn. Should have rehearsed. And lastly, National Administrative Professionals Day is next week. And I look across the room to Michelle, who was such a tremendous support for myself, as well as many in this building. And we have others in this building, but across our entire school district, the administrative support that's provided in the front office. We oftentimes say that they are the face of our schools. Our families know them extremely well. I hear about Miss Kristen or Miss Britnall, and those of you who've known her since Island Park, and then in the counseling center, and now at the high school in the main office. And they're an integral part of our family experiences, as well as the students who they interact with. And so it'll be a great opportunity next week to honor all of our administrative professionals across our school district. And with that, those are the recognitions.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you on behalf of the board, Michelle, for everything you do for us. We would not be able to function without you, so most appreciated. Thank you. With that, we've
And
got.
she had a birthday yesterday. She cried.
We've got public input. My apologies that we're running a little late on public input. We've got 3 people with public input, Stacy Smedberg, Susan Hamp, and Andy Hamp. And I will just read our little disclaimer first. But I hope everyone's here. We'll start with Stacy. So first, this meeting is a meeting of the board and public. It's not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. When addressing the board at the meeting, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes. Appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of that student's parent or legal guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to issues expressed. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Please let us know your name for the record and your feedback.
I'm Stacy Smedford, and I thank you for giving me an opportunity to share. And I'm Northwood Elementary PE teacher. And we agreed here tonight that trusting relationships are at the core of our thriving learning community. In the elementary schools, students work with their physical education teachers, librarians, and music teachers for up to 6 years. Students recognize us throughout the building, which increases a sense of safety and continuity. Student learning is enriched and interests are discovered through the specialist programs. These programs challenge the mind and body in ways unexplored in the classroom. Currently, our elementary students receive 70 minutes of physical education per week. The Washington Administrative Code states that an average of at least 100 instructional minutes per week per year of physical education shall be required by all pupils grades 1 through 8. We have this opportunity now to increase services for our young learners. Maintaining a 1.0 FTE would place us closer to the state's 100-minute requirement in instructional PE. Mercer Island School District's mission highlights solving problems creatively and working collaboratively. Yes, collaboration takes time. Most specialists learned about the proposal to make cuts just 2 days before the last board meeting. The lack of collaboration has shaken the mental wellness and the sense of value that many of us feel. We were not asked to brainstorm solutions, but I wonder, has the district considered flexible boundary zones in which families could proactively enroll in the nearest school likely to remain open with the projection enrollment declines? Another solution would be to grant requests of 0.1 leave based on final enrollment. This would help reestablish security and provide time to collaborate and problem solve, for us to be true to our mission and to lead by example. For my colleagues and I, this RIF not only means a 10% reduction in income, it means less time towards retirement, a slower rise in the salary scale, and overall time loss in security or in seniority. Accepting a 0.9 contract would also highly restrict our future ability to transfer within the district. My family could adjust for 1 year, but it would be a very hard decision to be made if my full-time contract was rescinded. I have served the district for 15 years, working at all 4 elementary schools, regularly submitting grants, receiving thousands of dollars this year alone. I've brought in enrichment from the community and volunteered over hundreds of hours for the all-out and track meet. In 2018, I was recognized as Elementary Teacher of the Year, and since comprehending the effects of the RIF, it has been difficult for many, myself included, to attend to the jobs that we truly are passionate about. So I ask that the proposed RIF be reappraised. There are other creative solutions to be considered. Reductions could be reconsolidated to offer a more desirable part-time position for a few and stability for the other employees affected. Flexible, proactive boundaries could be drawn. Tech monies could be used to support literacy, computer literacy, and media literacy in libraries. And specialists could rotate into coach positions. The district could use this opportunity to nearly fully fulfill the state's requirement in physical education. And lastly, and most simply, if the district reconsiders these reductions, students would receive an increase in social emotional learning opportunities. Thank you.
Susan, please.
And is it possible for Andy and I to come together?
Oh, yeah, sure. Are you using both times together or?
Yes, if that's possible.
Sure, yeah, that's
Okay.
possible. We'll fix that over there.
I'm Susan Ham and Andy Ham. And we spoke last month as well. Dear Mercer Island School Board members, I wrote an email to you a little over a week ago and appreciated receiving from Director D'Souza a response today. Within that email, I thanked you for your willingness to hear from so many parents, staff, and students during the public input portion last month. It was inspiring to see so many students, staff, and parents encouraged to share their thoughts with you. Thank you. I've been encouraged to share some of the points within that email at this venue with the goal of transparency. I would also like to thank Directors Sullivan and Battersby for their help in gathering data, including the savings that would be acquired through the elementary specialist RIFs. Administrative pay. Within my email, I shared that I know that this is a done deal, and I understand and support the interest to make sure we keep and attract quality administrative staff within Mercer Island School District, but want to make sure that you are aware that while the Mercer Island and the MIA certificated staff received a hard-fought 3.683% increase this year, the administrative raise equated to slightly over a 3.7% increase. It was not just a simple math problem of 3.2% plus 0.487% equals 3.687%. The 0.487% raise was placed on top of the previous 22-23 school year 3.2% raise, making it a 3.7% increase. We realized the total dollar amount of the 0.487% adjustment may have only been around $20,000 to $30,000, not much in the big picture, but wanted to share when many of our members were upset when the administrative staff received a greater raise than the MIA certificated employees right before the RIFs were announced. Elementary librarians. Within a presentation during last month's school board, it was shared that during the 2012-13 school year, there was only one librarian for each 605 students. What was not shared is that the librarians at that time had an additional 6 or more hours of weekly support from a library paraprofessional. What was also not shared in that 2012-2013 school year is that there were overload music and PE specialists. Lakeridge had a full-time specialist and at least a 0.4 more FTE in both PE and music to cover the classes. The other factor is that specialists taught 30-minute classes instead of the present 35-minute classes, thus could provide instruction to 2 more homeroom classes. Between the 2 teachers, this would equate to the ability to teach an additional 10 or more homeroom classes. An easy fix for keeping the elementary music and PE specialists whole, and I know that you had read this, Director D'Souza, increase the classroom teachers' preparation time by 20 minutes a week by having these specialists teach 40-minute classes. This time is desperately needed by the classroom teachers who presently only get 35 minutes of planning time per day, plus an extra 35 minutes in the library once a week. This alteration would fully utilize your music and PE teachers and provide them with the security of the 1.0 FTE for a total cost of $71,000, including benefits. P.S. If you did the math and realized that classroom teachers are presently getting 35 minutes of planning time 6 times a week, instead of the 30 minutes 5 times a week back in 2012, keep in mind that the school day was extended by 15 minutes in 2017, which essentially took away 75 minutes of the teacher's weekly non-student contact time. Classroom teachers in 2023 have less time to prepare for their students than they did in 2012. I'm not saying that any of the above information was intentionally left out of the presentations. And maybe you already knew all of this, but I wanted to make sure so we have the full information. Finally, the reduction in force of the above elementary specialists directly competes with 3 of the district's interests shared within that presentation. While reducing the FTE of these staff members will minimally assist our district to restore the fund balance and provide financial stability and sustainability, it will certainly negatively impact the social and emotional well-being of our students, decrease the competitive compensation for these staff members, and deter excellent educators to remain or hire on as employees of the Mershon School District. If you have any questions, I would be happy to share the research I've done on the above issues and more. Thank you so much for your time.
You're a dynamic duo in supporting so thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and present today and help inform us as we make these decisions. Most appreciated. I appreciate also that reading that there's a lot of numbers and a lot of data there. We do appreciate the email very much. And that is also more digestible in some ways. So thank you. And with that, we have a close on public input unless anybody else wanted to go. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Sorry, bringing this up. Superintendent's report. Yes.
Great. Thank you, President D'Souza. Just a couple of things. First off, want to extend my appreciation to our community for their, understanding and really perseverance the last 48 hours, 48 hours with regard to the water situation on the island. And I'm pleased to report tonight that as this meeting was going on, there was an announcement that went out that the final valve was repaired and water was tested. It's clean and it's flowing back into the tanks. And so we'll have a full day of school tomorrow. It doesn't look like we'll have any interruption tomorrow to our day. So very excited about that news. I want to thank the city, our city manager, and that entire staff, as well as our staff, Tony and Ian, Patrick from transportation. We were up late last night. They were on a call 4 a.m. this morning with the city. And then we were up at 5 a.m., the three of us with them, talking and trying to figure out the best case scenario. So there hasn't been really any negative feedback that I've received. I want to give a real positive feedback to the community. When we can serve, we can do great things. And there is no question in my mind that we would probably be struggling for school tomorrow without the conservation, because we never had to go to the mandatory boiling of water. That would have been the really critical element to whether or not we can have school. Because once we can't serve lunches, then we only have the choice of going a half day or no school. So because of that water conservation effort by the entire community, they were able to really save and make an impact. So that's my report on the water. In the news, there was a great article that I'll put into the board report this week, but on the science of reading. And, we had the opportunity this week, along with Nova Williams, to be interviewed by a group of students in the journalism, the videography class. And their culminating project this year for this particular group was all on the reading changes that we've made over the last decade as a school district. And we were able to highlight a lot of the things we did. And then on the heels of that, I received this article from a parent who was part of the original Different Learners Committee 10 plus years ago. And she passed this along and just expressed her great appreciation for our district and how far we've come compared to others. And so it's a great write-up about kids can't read, the revolt that is taking on the educational establishment. And it's really this idea of those who continue to push back on the science of reading versus those who are embracing it. So I think a celebration for great things that are happening in our classrooms and just the changes we've made with instruction. On Tuesday morning, we'll have the Breakfast of Champions. So looking forward to that event and bringing back a few friends from the past who I haven't seen for a while, but I reached out to. So Vicky Puckett will be coming to the breakfast and taking it by storm. So get ready, Mr. Wold. We'll have Vicky back in the building. So, you might want to prepare everyone for that. But we'll have some others. And then finally, you'll notice that the open enrollment piece did not appear on the agenda tonight. The city manager and I just have not had the chance to get together to talk. We meet next week for coffee. It's on our agenda to talk more, and then I'll bring back versions of that. The other part of my report is within the body of the meeting, so I'll move on from there.
Thank you very much. Tim.
Fred, I just want to say thank you for you and your team for all the behind the work scene that you did on the water issue. And I just thought the communication was very clear. And I appreciate seeing kind of a very detailed to show the community like all the decisions that were being made. And I think that really helps people to understand better than just saying, hey, school will be late by 2 hours. But I appreciate the communication. I really like it.
I do as well, and I thank you for mentioning the open enrollment for city staffers kids, because I had that in my mind as the announcements kept coming out. You were like, I'm gonna need a meeting with the city's working super hard on helping us try to figure out how to keep the schools open. And I was thinking about how hard all of these city employees work to help us keep our schools open and running. It just seems fair that they already have skin in the game.
Well, Tony and Patrick are listening, and all of them, goes to them, and Ian, Matt, Aaron, Michelle, and Reeves, who drove his wife's car to work today, just in case he had to deliver water. It was really a big team effort, and it was everyone working together. And, it's also about the teachers and the principals and the paraeducators in school, keeping the focus on school. It's easy to get distracted and everyone thinking about other things, but I was at Northwood today for a little while and others, and, school continues, and testament to everyone involved.
Thank you. Students on governing boards, Andrew.
Happy to be back here. I was so sad when I couldn't make it last month, so I was just now I'm super excited I'm here, able to share the board report. We'll start at the high school. Before break, our drill team placed 4th place in the pom category, as well hosted more tryouts with the middle schoolers, is Principal Budget said earlier. We have DECA Internationals this weekend in Florida. These students qualified and will be attending, which is always super exciting. And our MIDI teams qualified for internationals as well. Our mock trial placed 5th in state at the end of March, and multiple people in debate placed at state in they had their banquet last week. Our Science Olympiad team placed 8th this past week as well. Spring break was quite rejuvenating for students as we head into the final quarter of the school year, including with AP tests for students who are taking those. We've had over 1,000 signups to take AP tests. During the break, Mr. Stafford chaperoned the annual DC close-up trip where students got to experience DC, the different government entities, and engage in mock trial with the students around the country. And just talking to a couple students, they said it was really, really cool. And I believe this year was one of their biggest signups that they've had. As Dr. Rundle said, the Breakfast for Champions is next Tuesday. Many of our senators, leadership students, and superintendent student advisory participants will also be there bright and early. Asha noted, as well as me and Andrew with the 6 a.m. start time. So we will be there and excited to work and help out because we know how big the school's foundation supports us. The Fine Arts Showcase has also been held since our last board meeting, and as always, it's an amazing community event where students are able to see, play, and hear all different types of arts that our district has to offer, which is really something special. Teacher appreciation was also, we had a Spirit Week the week before spring break, and we had a Teacher Appreciation Day where students could match their teachers, and during lunch they could write thank you notes to their teachers. Our clubs have been hosting events like ECAR, which we've heard, Science National Honor Society, One Love, and Unified Sports. They've all been out in their communities, really doing quite amazing things. And during Green Team has been leading activities this week on how students can reduce, reuse, and recycle as well. Our superintendent student advisory had a joint meeting with student senators, and we discussed homework over break, grading periods, and Schoology use with Mr. Wold. And the meeting was very productive, and we continue to brainstorm great ideas and are moving forward with meeting with teachers towards the end of the school year. At the middle school, the middle schoolers are doing their annual play, which is Beauty and the Beast. Their performances is from May 19th to 21st. The MIHS robotics team is top 6 at the 2023 Washington BRC Middle School Regional Championship States. And they finished to now have a 2023 VEX Robotics World Championship in Dallas, Texas, which is taking place this month, which is really, really exciting. The track and field started competing and will continue into the 3rd trimester. And the high school boys golf team has hosted a camp this past week that will run weekly to teach and mentor boys golf students at the middle school who wants to do boys golf, which is also really exciting. We heard from our advisory group that students were excited that they're entering the 3rd and last trimester of the school year, and 8th graders are excited to head up to the high school. Finally, at our elementary school, part of the things that our student advisory group has been working on, we've talked about this, is broadcasting voice. You guys will hear about that next week, but Lake Ridge has a newsletter where they are interviewing students and putting that out there, and teachers are helping them collaborate with that, and that's been really successful. All the elementary schools have received their 5th grade sweatshirts, which is always kind of a fun time, and signing each other's sweatshirts. All of our members said it was a blast. Lake Ridge also hosted a readathon with author Ben Clampton. He's the guy who writes the Narwhal picture books, which I did not know, but I love those books. They're really great. Northwood had high schoolers visit about the IDEA project. Northwood and I think most of the schools now have had that, which we've already heard a lot about, just continuing that connections. At Northwood Elementary, the Kids Quest Museum visited all 3 kindergarten classes to present their Forces in Motion program, thanks to the Schools Foundation. And West Mercer is hosting their novel writing project with their 5th grade classes, which is always a fun time of year. Island Park Elementary student Surrey participated in the 2023 Washington State Science and Engineering Fair on March 31st and won 3 awards. And Island Park had a toy maker visit where 5th graders participated in boat making. Finally, for Earth Month, the school district is working with Rydell to collect in plastic film for MISD families from May 15th to 19th. Students and families are able to drop off their collected plastic films at their school, which Rydell will then pick up, which we wanted to highlight because we know Green Team has been a part of that. Finally, as Dr. Rundle said, we have our linkage meeting next week with the board. Asha and I have been working on formulating questions. We first worked with our student advisory, told them sort of what the meeting would look like, and we kind of helped them brainstorm possible questions that they'd want to ask you guys. And now we're going through the process of taking all the questions, editing them, and then we're going to prepare them for you guys, and they'll have the opportunity to ask you guys questions, and you guys will have the opportunity to ask them questions. So we're really excited to be doing this for the first year, and we hope it's something that, if it goes well, can continue on for years to come. That's the end of the
Larry's
report.
been hot on that one for a little while.
Yeah,
so it'll
he
be
has.
great. So thank you.
That's the end of the report. So if you have any other questions, let me know. Yeah.
Just, it's rid well, not ride well.
Oh, right.
The idea is like you're getting rid of it well,
Well, there
instead
you
of recycling it.
I was just looking at what plastic film entails. Like, just, you know. What? I just
Yeah.
Googled plastic film.
It's basically like plastic that isn't like a hard recyclable plastic with a
There's
number
no-
stamped on it, yeah.
That's just.
The more you know.
Right.
And that's a company that was developed by a kid. Originally a kid whose dad supported him in what he wanted to do, like a middle school kid.
Wow.
Local, I think.
Thank you, Andrew. Any other questions for Andrew? Looking forward to next week, they'll share it. Thank you for all your work in setting this up and ensuring it goes well, so that it does continue. Cheers. But 5B, budgeting and financial planning, proposed changes to student fees.
Provided to you as we've been doing basically since October with the budget calendar. But tonight we have 2 pages or parts of the budget that you'll see in whole at the June 1st study session. Specifically, this is our student fee schedule. For the past couple of months, myself, Director Adams, Assistant Director Garcia Fava, have been out in the schools, meeting with the admin, office managers, etc., walking through and getting data information as it pertains to our student fees. Everything from CPE, CCR, to our ASB programs, students in sports, district-wide fees, and then food service fees also. What I've done here is provide the current fees, 22-23 for you. I notice that's a typo at the top, but it should, oh no, it's 23-24, sorry. And then in red is any changes from one year to the next. There's very few at this point, speaking with our schools and our programs and our departments. Like I said, the 3 that are changing are in red. And this should be roughly page 15, the budget document. Also, Superintendent Rundle, I'm going to touch upon the sports fees.
Yep. One thing that we'll update on there too is it's gonna be a range. So if we look at, for instance, club dues, it's $10 to $100. Certain fees are different. The athletics will be the same, somewhere between 60 and 100 at IMS and 250 to 350 at the high school. So we're asking for a range, so we'll make that change. But the reason why we're asking for the range is right now we're working with our booster clubs, our parents. We've been surveying our athletes, surveying our parents to kind of determine, what is the appetite for increasing that fee. We do overspend on athletics by quite a bit using the general fund to pay or the EPNO to help pay for athletics. And so we're looking at how do we close that gap slightly. We'll certainly not cover the whole piece, but we're trying to get a sense and involve our community. So it's not just we bring it to them and say, oh, you have a new fee. We're going to really try to work with our families. So Lindsay, Blaine, as well as Nick Wold have been working hard on engaging our community on that to determine if there's a different amount that we might charge. There are some districts that do an athletic fee and then they do a transportation fee. And so then they kind of break it out. We've always kind of kept those two things together. That could be an avenue that we go down when we start looking at that with our athletic fees. But we certainly know that costs for our coaches and travel and things have gone up. And we need to be thinking about how to make it still affordable and we don't create barriers for our athletes, but also thinking about the budgetary impact as well. So those are the main changes there. We might, if we ever have any others, we always bring those to you. But this is our first pass, and obviously it's coming to you sooner than it typically does, again, because of what Director Sullivan mentioned, and that is we'll be coming to you in June with the budget instead of August.
I appreciate looking at these, and it certainly will impact some families more than others, but what I also think is really important is that I think our community is very unaware of the fact that the state funds zero when it comes to athletics, and especially when our teams make it to postseason play, that it's all on us, transportation and accommodations for our athletes and for our coaches. I think that knowing that would increase the understanding and the willingness. Just in terms of the transparency, parents that I run in a lot of the sports team circles, and people ask me like, how much does the state contribute? I'm like, nothing. And people are shocked. It's frustrating. I don't know if there's much we can do about it when they don't even fully fund education or special education, but just so people know, I think it also might be interesting to look at the cost for, not increase the mandatory fee, but say, on like fundraising stuff, it's like to fully fund. Let parents know what it is to fully fund their student in a season of sport. And if they can contribute that, maybe they will. And just that information, people give a lot, and they give a lot to booster clubs and all the other things around the island. I mean, it's tremendous amount to booster clubs that help fund a lot of these things as well. But anyways, it's just, there's huge fees out there, and people don't know why we always seem to come up short. So I just think that information.
And just, I think you had an email this week from a parent about one of our clubs in particular, and I'm going to be meeting with that community member in a couple of weeks, but something that does come up, especially when it has to do with fees for clubs or athletics, and they wonder if there's excess, what happens to that? And Director Sullivan, as he's shared in presentations to us into the community, ASB fund is an ASB fund, and it cannot be moved into other areas, and so it does not become part of the general fund. Money that's paid for student activities, student fees, stays in that ASB fund and is used on students, and is never transferred into the general fund. I don't know if you want to say anything else about.
No, that's certainly
Any other questions? Not all events and clubs are represented here. Is that because fundraising occurs outside of ASB?
In some cases, yes. Some cases it occurs within the booster club, or it shows up as club dues. There's some more generic titles on there too, because some of them have a more generic and it's not as specific.
And then in terms of scholarships or support for other students or families who cannot afford it.
Yep.
Does that come out of this fund or some other fund?
It depends. Sometimes it's out of a school's foundation fund, sometimes it's out of a PTA fund, and sometimes it's out of these funds or a booster. For these funds, there are certain clubs and organizations that build in fee structures to extra costs. They're not these costs, but there are, let's say a group pays their initial fee and that's what you've approved, and then they're gonna go to a global competition. There are extra fees for that. There are clubs that will add on a scholarship fund. Some of them build it in, some of them say, if you can afford it, would you be willing to chip in another $25 for a student who may not be able to attend? So there's a number of different ways. I think sometimes people also, and I think this is another point, Director Lurie, that we have to continue to make, and that is, you know, they hear about other districts that use Title I funding to overcome costs or whatnot, just remembering that our Title I funding doesn't even cover one teacher. And so we don't have that same luxury in terms of using that like per kid for kid. So we have to find other creative solutions for that.
What's the process and what does it look like in terms of clubs and activities seeking sort of formal financial support from the district? Because I understand that the cost to provide, you know, athletics isn't fully subsidized by the school, but it's partially subsidized by the school. But some activities receive little to no subsidy from the school. So how does that look like?
Yeah, and so this has evolved over time, so I can't speak to all of the different ways. Sometimes it's been, that's how some booster clubs have come to form. Well, I mean, because what does that partnership look like and what's the district responsibility gonna be versus what would a booster club look like? Sometimes it's a club or organization going to the principal and saying, you know, here's a club and activity and this is the extra cost that it may occur there. And then sometimes it comes out of a school budget, or sometimes they come then to the district and say, we're gonna need extra funding for this particular piece. And then it's either district funding, schools foundation, or others.
Because I think at a high level, I mean, in our district, right, a lot of kids participate in Destination Imagination.
Yep.
It's a phenomenally expensive competition at the national level. So is a lot of sports too. And I think the question is, you know, what percentage or what funds should be available in whatever the activity is that come from the district, and what should come from parents. And I think, you know, like those conversations can be challenging, and but I think it's useful to just sort of discuss what exactly is on the table and being discussed.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to what's part of the core experience versus what are those things that a club or organization wants to do that's well beyond. Every student gets to participate in that regional competition and be there. Then there's the state competition, which is always in Kennewick. And then there's the globals, which used to be in Tennessee and now is in Kansas City. And so, you know, some of those are choices that we're making along the way. But those, you know, we have to continue to have these conversations.
And I think there's far more than you're even aware of. I mean, anything that goes beyond and frankly, anything that goes beyond the state is fundraising and parents. It's not the district, it's DECA and radio when they go for awards. Sports don't go, I mean, unless they do a special, you know, tournament somewhere, that's all funded by them. You know, DECA, they're able to keep the cost down because the student store raises money that's by the DECA students that, so and band, they're raising money and they're paying for their trips. I mean, it's not, the district isn't covering any of that, which there isn't. I'm not suggesting they should be, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's interesting though that from an equity and a transparency perspective, could there perhaps be a policy around this and some clarity over time that makes it clear how sports are funded in a written format or something, and what's legacy, what's not, how much does the school really fund out of the general fund? You know, do we have a budget item for that we think about and try and cap it and think about how to do this in a more equitable way that's more transparent, I guess, especially as the number of different things people are doing is changing.
Yeah, especially like sort of post-COVID, as people are finally starting to get out and travel more and so forth. It would be useful, I think, for parents to be able to see like a pie chart of, you know, kind of where the funding comes from, which, like, I realize you have a lot of other important things.
Yeah.
You guys are doing that, but just down the road, like there's something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like running water, right?
But, you know, also the points Deborah made with all the different groups that have taken up fundraising for their own events. It's, yeah, I keep forgetting about the booster clubs and the band and all the other things that you do donate to or have parties for, or
Right.
it's pretty significant.
And, you know, we've taught, I just, as a parent of an athlete, I've had conversations with Mr. Walden and Lindsay at the high school in terms of, you know, there's lots of schools around, I think most of the Bellevue schools, and I know others that have, you know, community-wide booster clubs that support all their students. And whether we do it, you know, whether we talk about it just for athletics or we talk about it for all the activities, and that way those who need can basically just apply to this group. And instead of, you know, I know a lot of parents, I mean, we give a lot of money for the things our kids are involved in, but if we can pool it all, we're just that much more powerful. And I know that there's talk of exploring that, so hopefully.
And we'll be back at work. I was working with the School Alliance just this morning, already thinking about the next legislative session, even though this one hasn't ended, on the EP&O levy. Because that's the enrichment programs and operations. And that's a big piece of exactly what that levy should be. And when they capped us and brought us down, these are some of those impacts. And so, you know, the legislature may not have wanted to take it up this time because they don't want to tax and all these things. Well, I've heard some families say this feels like a tax because they have to pay into this or pay into that. And I get that sentiment. So how can we go back to look at that? So we'll be talking about those things again.
Thank you. We'll move on to 5.
It'll show up on consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. 5C, budget and financial planning, organizational chart.
Yeah, this is an informative slide or page in the budget, it'd be page 16, kind of similar to the budget assumption and priorities they shared probably about a month ago with you all. This is something for us that we're quite familiar with, but a part of that budget document, almost 40 pages, is for anyone to grab the document, to take a look at how our district operates, how we function. And this is just quite that 35,000 foot perspective on the org chart of our district. So like I said, whomever opens the budget document, obviously aside from the F-195, they can take a look at this and go, oh, this is how the district functions. That's all it is.
Any questions? Thank you. This is useful. Thank you.
Is this gonna go on the website?
There is 3 different org charts on the website. It's similar to this. There's also, I think, the, and help me out here in this one. There's also learning services org chart and the school board org chart is there too.
Thanks.
About us, organizational charts.
They're in the right place.
Oh, look at that.
So if you're gonna put this on the website, is this how Mary Jo spell her name? It's like Happy Joe Mary.
That is a typo.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we don't have it.
Okay.
Internal smile. We're gonna.
Let's, thank you all. Let's move to 5D, financial administration, and OEA, asset protection.
Matt, declaration of surplus property.
Pull it up here real quickly. This is provided to you once, twice a year, and look it over with Michelle. Collected from twice a year, collected from our tech staff, our learning services team, our maintenance team also, and transportation. And this is items or obviously not needed anymore, vehicles that are not functional. And you all as a board need to look at this, approve this list, and we can dispose of accordingly.
There any questions of what's being disposed of? We had a nice spreadsheet there. Okay, with that, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 722 regarding the declaration of surplus property?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. And with that, all in favor? Andrew?
Aye.
And directors?
Aye.
Any against? So that's 1050 in favor of resolution 722. Thank you very much, Matt. Moving forward. Financial administration draft resolution 720. 23-24 reduction in education program. Fred.
Great. So moving into our reduction in force resolution. I'll have Aaron talk about a couple things in a moment, but just want to bring us back to some high level aspects of a reduction in force. I think it's always important to remember that this is the authority that the board would be granting to me to carry out a reduction in force should we feel that we have to. Unfortunately, May 15th is a hard deadline for us. I do not believe the legislature is going to go any further than their session, which means next week it should wrap up. That means that May 15th deadline will stay in place. Action that is taken, there's a very formal process that goes through as we go through, but again, it's not tonight, it's not saying that these positions are absolute, but rather it's the authority to do so. So just a couple of things here, Andrews, I have access to share, thank you. So just wanted to highlight a couple of things. I've updated this presentation slightly. The version that you saw in your March meeting is up as well, but I've just made a couple of amendments to this particular presentation, just recentering us kind of back to where we are. There is an ongoing commitment, and we do our very best to make sure that we're communicating, being compassionate, being consistent, and communicating again. I certainly know that we might not hit that mark every time. You heard in public comments of one of our staff members who I have a tremendous amount of respect for and hired when she came to the district down at Lake Ridge and worked with her for a while. And it's not, I think the feedback is important, but we're always trying to make sure that we are communicating effectively and consistently, and that's what this is about as well. Just reminding us of why are we contracting or even going through the RIF. These are really unchanged. It really has to do with that enrollment decline, the unbalanced nature of staffing and student enrollment. Our fund balance margins no longer exist. And I want to just return to this one for a moment. And that is, I think there's two things that Director Sullivan and I continue to talk about, and Director Battersby and I talk about, and that is when you have a high fund balance, you have a margin of error. If you miss on your staffing a little bit, it's okay. Or if you miss on your enrollment projections, it's okay. But when you don't have that margin, you can't afford to guess and you can't afford to be wrong. And so you have to be more conservative. And that's really the situation that we find ourselves in as we're moving forward. These continue to be goals and objectives of what we're trying to accomplish as a school district. And I realize that these are sometimes in competition with one another. They're not always working nicely. And so when we're trying to stabilize our finances, then enrollment and staffing congruence is important, which means we need to make sure we're very accountable to our staff and our community members about where the money's going, why it's going there, and where and what that looks like. And finally, obviously, we want to be student and staff focused and supported. I added this graph in because it really is a both and I think that this is really the center of the challenge that's in front of all of us. And that is, on the one hand, we have to staff our buildings within our means. What do we have available to us? And at the same time, we also have to think about the financial savings. And I think that our colleague Susan Hamp articulates very well that in some ways, some of the savings, even in this RIF, are not huge in number. But at the same time, we're also trying to accomplish staffing within our means. And so I think that this is not just a one-year challenge for us. This is going to be a multi-year challenge as our enrollment shrinks, which seems to be what's going to continue. We're watching numbers every single day. Director Sullivan was on the phone with 2 of our administrative assistants, getting a pulse of, is our kindergarten enrollment trending the way it typically does? And then giving a report there. I watch enrollment every single day at kindergarten, 6th grade and 9th grade. We have 20 in other grades. I can report, pleased to say, we've got 20 more first graders coming in next year than we do kindergartners right now. And so we're watching that, and because we want to be close, but we have to make these balanced, and it doesn't always look like the savings is there, but we're accomplishing the goal of really matching our staffing with our students, or we're matching staffing with students, and there is a financial cost to that, and we weigh that as well. So where are we in the process? Here we are tonight on the 20th of April. This is the RIP resolution seeking your approval tonight. We still have the legislative session to end next week. I wish I had better news on the special education financing, but I think about 125,000 plus some transportation money is about all we're going to see, unfortunately. Reminding ourselves that we're $3 million in the hole for spending on special education. And so 125,000 is nice, but it certainly doesn't close that gap the way we were hoping that it would. So we'll be working really hard. We'll continue to work with staff. We'll continue to work with our budgets to figure out where we can avoid reductions in force. Taking a look at, are we going to see any more resignations, retirements, and changes? Once we hit May 15th, that is the last day we can take action on the RIF portion of it. We'll come to you then at the end of May, 1st of June, go through a full study session on the new budget, and then present to you the first reading of the budget at your first meeting in June, and then at your second meeting, seek approval for the next budget for the next year. Working and happening alongside with all of this is negotiations for our 2 new contracts with Mercer Education Association. And so that will continue and that will play alongside as well. These we covered last time, and I'm not going to go into them in great detail with our constraints and our unknowns, but the few things that are starting to crystallize on our unknowns, as I said, are some of the legislative inaction, as I'd like to call it, at this point. So ongoing concerns. I certainly saw the email today as well that Susan Hamp had referenced, and I think that there are some points that she has in there, and so I just wanted to illustrate a couple of things and tie some of those numbers together that I think she nicely illustrated. The first one is just thinking, and I know Lake Ridge the best because I was sitting in that chair at the time. And so, as was indicated, with those 26 homeroom classrooms, we had a full-time librarian. At the time, I had an hour and a half of library clerk time. There might have been schools with more than that. I'm not privy to all of that, but that's what I had at that time. It was 20 classes equal to 1.0 FTE. We based it off of the 30-minute class sessions. And so those are articulated. So we had 1.6 music teachers actually was the staffing allocation for that, where it was 1.25 for PE. The reason is because in PE, we were combining classes. We'd have 2 teachers in the gym at the same time, but we might have 2 first grade classrooms. And that was because in order to get lunches in with that many sections to go through PE, we had to double up classes. And so that's where you might see some of that. And then you have a quarter of an art teacher versus what we're looking at for next year, and kind of going back in the juxtaposition there of why those 15 homerooms, 17 classes is the new total that we use for a 1.0 FTE. What I want to illustrate in the top piece, and this will continue to be our commitment, and that is when we have more than the number of sections, we always then overfund. And sometimes we have teachers that take on extra caseload and they're actually funded at a 1.1 or a 1.2. And in other cases, we hire another teacher. The challenge for us now is we're going the other direction. Is we're not over, we're now under. And so the cost savings may not be huge, but being consistent with what we've done over time, that's why it's appearing there. Now, we could add in another section. I'm watching closely some numbers at Lake Ridge, for example, right now, where our first grade classes are getting quite large. And so we're looking at what are we going to do? We might have to add an extra section. If we add an extra section and go to 16, that probably actually rounds to a 1.0. And so there's wiggle room that's going to happen. But I think we also have to look at the long range facility planning committee. I know that Director Lurie and Glowitz will probably update you later on in the meeting there, but one of their charges is to look at how many schools are we going to need long term. And when we're talking about small increments here, I also have to be thinking about, well, if we do go to 3 schools or we stay at 4, what's that going to look like from a staffing perspective long term? The other pieces that I just wanted to add in here is that, what are those impacts? And that is, at the high school and the middle school, we see these similar impacts. And I know you didn't hear about them tonight, but I certainly want to highlight them because it's at the high school and middle school as well. That we have some courses that we just didn't see the registration in. And we've had to collapse classes. And I think one of the challenges there that's in there is that, slide this out of the way, that we're trying not to impact courses that are sequential in nature. Because if you wipe out that lower class, those other classes down the road just won't exist in another 2 years. So we're trying to think about how do we maintain staffing in some of those classes that are more sequential in nature. And we've been able to find some creative solutions to that already as I looked at Mr. Wool, particularly at the high school. Some other components to that is just thinking about class sizes and how do we really think about class sizes in our elementary schools in particular, but certainly our middle school and our high school. And this is, I think the real challenge that I certainly face, and I think we all face, and that is this intersectionality. We have stated values, and we have our values, and we have our vision, we have our mission, we have our fundamentals. You heard about one of them tonight. But I also know that how you spend money is an expression of your values. And I think this is the one that hurts and is the hardest that I went back to. The challenges I had as a principal when I had to go through some of this in the recession or a new school and what I'm going through as a superintendent. And that is, there is no question that I value all of our coaches. I value all of our librarians. I value what they bring. We wouldn't have put them into play. We wouldn't have added those positions to begin with had we not valued them. But at the same time, we have values, and then we have what do we have financially? And I might value some things and wish that I could afford it, but I can't any further there. And so I think, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night, is really thinking about that disconnect and that challenge. But we have our students, and they have needs, and they're making choices with how they're registering for courses. And then we have our staff. And I think we have impacts to our staff, as you've heard from public comment in your last 2 meetings. There are professional impacts and there are personal impacts. Personal impacts of being reduced FTE. What does that mean either to current finances or future finances? And that's very real and is not lost on me. And is certainly something that I know we have to continue to think about and consider, while also thinking about the financial viability of our school district for the long haul. The last thing I would just point out, as you're thinking about this, and I know it's come up in a couple of your meetings, it came up tonight around, the overall salaries, and I just want to remind you, going back to that administrator piece, that I committed to our administrators that I would not adjust the 3.2, even though the associations received higher raises. My adjustment to them, as I said to them in the fall, was until we have a plan to restore the budget and to pay the $2 million, I couldn't in good conscience add any more funding to our administrator raises. And I know that those raises came on the heels of where the RIF was coming. But I also wanted to be true to my word that was also the time that we knew where we had the first $1 million installment. And now we'll have the second $1 million installment done at the end of this month.
Next Friday.
And so we had made that commitment. And so I went back to our administrative group, and I think, as it was pointed out, they might have had, or they received slightly greater raise. But the chart that I've also shown you and the rest of the public in the past, they're still 13, 14, even 18% off of some of the other employees in our district. So, it is a challenge, and your expectation of me is that I retain and attract all staff. And those are our administrators, our teachers, our custodians, our bus drivers, and I'll continue working on that. It is a joint effort. We'll continue to partner together. Sally and I continue to meet. Aaron meets with our association as well. It's how do we continue to unify with this? So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron on any updates on the RIF resolution since last month.
Yes. So there's been some changes as indicated that there may be, and those changes are, again, can you actually,
Do you want the exhibit?
yeah, exhibit A.
Gotcha.
Thank you. So the resolution itself is unchanged. The changes in the exhibit A, which identifies the actual area of reduction. And there's no change in the total FTE proposed for reduction. Again, that's authority. That doesn't mean that's necessarily what we executed or followed through. But there is change. If you go down to secondary grades 9 through 12, perfect. There is change with respect to world language. The high school was looking at how they would organize and really where enrollment, because they only had 48 hours before we had to publish a last RIF, and they worked very hard to figure out where student interests were and where we were getting enrollment. And they found that there was different ways they could organize the sections. So a reduction in world language Chinese that used to say French. So there's a change in that just based on the numbers and the needs of the students in those classes. And then the other change is with respect to English language arts is change where it used to read, I believe, science. But again, that has to do with the available classes at a certain level, which I believe is 12th grade, if my memory serves. And just where enrollment came in, there were other options for English 12 that were available to students where students were enrolling. And there was increase, I think perhaps because the changes, just the low enrollment in CTE, there's increase in some of the other science sections when those are pulled out of the course catalog. So that was the other change here, but the overall FTE remains the same. And so that is the proposal, and that is an explanation for the change. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for board members?
I have no questions. I have comments later
You can make comments. I just do want to highlight.
or. No, I have no comments about like the individual.
So I do want to highlight again, like, as I said, this is RIF authority. There may still be changes from what we ultimately do, but I think as Superintendent Rundle expressed, we will share that. We're bringing it now because we have a statutory deadline to communicate to our employees. But even last year, after RIF letters, which is how we communicate to employees that they're going to be reduced, after employee received them, then we were able to restore the employee because of changes in enrollment, and also just changes in people finding different jobs or our staffing. So that this could ultimately not be what we are reduced. And I do also want to share that this is not evince the total reduction in the system, because we have taken other steps, which is to not backfill resignations and leaves, so that we have so we do that first and then we move to risk last, because our goal is not to impact the humans who we have contractual obligation absent economic need to maintain their contracts. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say, like, this is a hard process, it's hard on our system. I know it's hard for you, so I recognize that as leaders, because they're our colleagues, but they've also taught your kids. They're parts of our community, the staff that are ultimately impacted by this. And so I do want to recognize that it's challenging for us, and that it's most challenging for those who will be receiving the RIF letters. So I do want to publicly acknowledge that there is a human impact here that maybe is not as readily, you don't see the names. You're welcome. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, so I mean, as you touched upon, like these conversations and decisions, as everyone acknowledges, are always difficult. And I know there's some disappointment on the legislative front, but I don't think I should gloss over some of the victories in the legislative front. 6 months ago, Reichdahl had a proposal that would have adjusted regionalization downward, that would have seen a 5% reduction in state apportionment funds that districts like our own would have received. And we very early mobilized as a school board and as a community, which the city adopted a resolution saying that a reduction would be harmful to our district. We met with Reichdahl, we contacted every single state legislator. And perhaps as a result of those efforts, I think we were clearly the most vocal district in terms of the harm that it would have caused us. And there is no change. And that means $2 million more per year that we're receiving than we would have had the regionalization been reduced. And so while these decisions are challenging, I think it's important to recognize that this board has done everything in its powers within reason to make sure that it was as favorable as possible to staff. The second comment is the authority for reductions obviously goes in tandem with the budget that will be passed in June, hopefully, and then also with negotiations with MIEA. You know, I think the expectations of the community and me as a board member is that by the end of this year, and this is just individually, I don't think the board has formally taken a position, that we be at 2.5% to 3% general fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. And I think by the end of the 25 school year, that we be at 8%. And so like, this is not an isolated decision, as difficult as it is, but it goes in tandem with other decisions that still await down the line. But I think what this board is evidenced by the actions today, when it comes to what is the reality and what can we do within our powers to compensate staff as much as possible, is taking concrete actions to do so, that has resulted in more dollars being available to pay out the salaries.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin, for recognizing the human kind of impact and how I think the board and like everybody, like this is really heavy as we have to make these kind of decisions. And I know that personally, you know, I mean, there are individual values. I appreciate how you said that sometimes we're balancing values, right? There's individual values, there's a whole collective board value, your value and the school district value. And personally, like where it sits heavy with me sometimes is a lot of our cuts are really things that may be further DEI initiatives, right? Because if we're basing on interests or you know, like we cut the Spanish program and then just seeing like Chinese, you know, part of that. I totally appreciate the rationale or the clarification on, you know, it's driven by students' interests, but it still hurts, right? That a lot of those things, you know, things that I personally believe in during the kind of result of the pandemic is how we need more, you know, like PE and arts and music in order for our students to actually be able to learn well in other things. So those are really hard things for me. But I appreciate the rationale, the transparency and the rationale on where you're making the cuts and why that is really helpful for me as an individual board member, but I think for the community as well, right? To learn that sometimes when if you have more students, you pay extra. So unfortunately, when it reduced down, then even though personally I might think that, oh, how can you cut a whole person down to 80%? But then following the logic, if we pay more when there's more students, unfortunately, it's kind of an accounting things of how we move it down to a 0.8. And I know in the past that we haven't talked about here is, I also, so ultimately, I do have faith in, Fred, that you are listening to the community, that you're listening to the teachers and the staff of where their concerns are. And that I know in the past that we have also done, like Erin is saying, like even after we make these decisions, we do all of our effort, try to make people job hold or find other options, right? But then how this is an unfortunate kind of process. But so far, within the unfortunate process that we all have to kind of go through to balance like the needs of students and our finance, that we're doing the best we can. And so I feel really good, not good, but I feel like at least we're doing the best that we can in this situation. But it still doesn't sit well, you know, to hear a lot of our cuts that are really tied to things that I feel like further our DEI initiative.
I echo, I think it's, no one wants to be making these decisions. I think due diligence has been done and I support the proposal. And Dr. Rundle, I appreciate you taking it all on your shoulders, but it's not. So we knew we were facing this and it's the right thing to do for, in combination of all of our values and making sure that we're making responsible fiscal decisions for our district.
What everyone else has said, but I also thank Dan and Deborah for their efforts in kind of defending the money that we do have as a district, especially in the area of like special education and the creative looks you all have been taking, and I hope will continue taking at other alternatives before a final decision gets made. So, thank you.
Me and Asha prepared just a quick little statement. So we said students, including Asha and I, acknowledge the complexity of these decisions that the school district has to make. It is difficult to see classes being cut or reduced at levels in our district. And we understand that it is necessary as enrollment decreases. And the school must restructure as well, not allowing for these tough choices to be made or even not having to make these difficult choices can end up having a way deeper impact on students. And in some ways, and it's in some ways at the high school and the middle school level, student voices are heard. Student voice is heard by the classes that they enroll or don't enroll in.
Thank you, Andrew. Dan, I guess you all have given, okay? Yeah, I will echo the appreciation to all the staff who came and provided input. I did not know that a 0.2 reduction had longer term impact either on staff. So I do appreciate that knowledge and how that's working. It is interesting as to how we think about dealing with declining enrollment right now. In an increasing enrollment environment, we can borrow in some sense against next year's budget to overstaff a little bit, knowing that the increasing enrollment will meet the staffing ratio. And kind of the opposite has to happen a little bit in a decreasing enrollment situation. I know also in 2012, we had a much bigger levy capacity. You know, I think by 2016, it was almost $17 million levy capacity versus an $11 million levy capacity now, with increased salaries being funded out of that too. So many challenges occurring as we move through this. Yeah, I agree with everyone else as well. Like we appreciate the feedback and the people behind it even more so. And I appreciate that people took the time to come to the board and help show how important these teachers have been to our kids and to our community, and to making us a great district. So I'll echo what everyone else has said, where we do hope that we continue this. We recognize this as authority. We do recognize what was requested from teachers was, you know, understand the people behind it and try to keep people whole. Cutting whole positions as opposed to point positions is more important. As well, thinking about how, you know, are we open to more teacher planning time, those sorts of ideas to make this all work out in terms of professionals. But in the end, as we've talked about, we have to run a budget that balances. We've got fund balance goals that have to be made. We've got a 5% fund balance goal that we expect to be made, and then the 8 to 10%. I'll defer on the when. And that's understood as well. We're legally obligated to do that at this point. So thank you for your hard work on all this. I appreciate the transparency. I appreciate as well the need to inform many constituencies at the same time. And I appreciate you did this stuff first before you did the board. You know, I think that was, yeah, that was very good. I appreciate that very much. And yes, we are second in this, but this is a respectful time for your staff, and that the board be second in notification. So thank you much. Sorry, with that, do I have a motion for resolution 720, the reduction in education program certificated impact?
So moved.
The motion for approval and a second. Okay, thank you. And with any discussion, we've had a student.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, directors, all in favor? Aye. Against? And abstain? And so with that, that's a 1050 approval of resolution number 720. Okay. Thank you very much for your hard work on this. Okay. Let's keep moving. Full governance process monitoring 6A, OE7 financial administration.
Great. Would you like to go through them one by one, address the ones where we've marked not in compliance for the superintendent? How would you like to proceed?
Yeah, good question. Let's assume the whole thing and let's address the ones which are marked not in compliance.
Okay. Director Sullivan, do you want to take the lead on those that we marked not in compliance? You want me to take the lead? How do you want to do that?
I think it's easy as that. Looking at this document in compliance, we can note, the obvious are number 5, which is maintain annual budget reserves of at least 8% with a target of 10% for the prior fiscal year ended as August 31st. Obviously, in discussions myself and Superintendent Rundle, we are not in compliance on this one. And then also not in compliance number 7, only incur debt as necessary and allowed by the adopted budget. Obviously, we felt the $2 million loan taken out last year put us out of compliance on number 7.
Okay, any discussion, any questions from board members? All right, with that, do I have a motion to determine compliance in conjunction with the superintendent's determination?
So moved.
This-
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion? And with that, all in favor, Andrew?
Aye.
Aye. Directors?
Aye.
Aye. Against? None. And abstain? None. So with that, we mirror the superintendent's determination with a 1050 vote. Okay, thank you. Facilities and capital assets, 6B.
On this one, we did go over with careful scrutiny as well. We did not find any areas in this one that was not in compliance based on our assessments. And so our recommendations are that we are in compliance and pending your analysis as well.
Any discussion for board members? With that, do I have a motion to find the superintendent in compliance across the items in OE11?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. With that, all in favor, Andrew?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
Any nays? And abstains? With that, we find the superintendent in compliance, 1050. Next item, board members' code of conduct, C, I guess, this is us. Yeah, okay. Okay, how would we like to proceed on this? Do we want to step through each one, or do we want to do the whole thing, or would we like to do any exceptions from in compliance and non-compliance?
Can we do the whole thing? Comment, if we have a comment?
Sure. With that, do I have a motion to find the board in compliance of our code of conduct?
So moved.
And a second,
Second.
okay. Any discussion?
Yes, so I'm going to vote that to find us not, I'm going to propose that we find ourselves not in compliance on a couple of these points. I think that we have really like grown and evolved as a board over the last year. And I think that we are now, right now, in compliance. But I think that this is talking about the entire year from like 1 year ago to now. And that I think that we have struggled both in some of us individually and also as a group in some cases with items number. Sorry, I didn't care. Particularly with items 2 and 3. Just that there have been occasions when board members have publicly expressed individual negative opinions about staff members' performance. Which is, so I guess 2B and 3. Sorry, I had this all written down and then I didn't remember that. Just my overall issue has been with like respect for staff who are presenting and respect for both teachers and administrators. And I feel like that was an issue for us earlier in the year. So for me, I can't vote yes to find us in compliance for the whole year. So that's just me. I'm not trying to convince anyone else of anything.
Which items, 2B and 3?
2B and some aspect of 3, yeah.
I'm not sure if, since you said that you find the board not in compliance, if I should delve into, which incidents, those may elicit. I think there has to be the opportunity to engage in conversation that's critical, without it being such a brittle conversation that it is misinterpreted as being disrespectful. And finding the board out of compliance. I don't think that bodes well for our district's ability to discuss difficult decisions in an open way. So without further information, I disagree.
Any other board members' comments? Sam?
Question, so when it says the board, and if you're saying individuals, then is it the board?
That's a great question, and I realize that much of the year that I'm talking about, I was actually presiding over the board, right? So like I could be held responsible, you know, as the person running some of those meetings. I'm more concerned about the experience of people who come to our meetings. So people who come to our meetings to share about the programs that they're working on or that sort of thing. Like, I feel that the board as a whole needs to be responsible for the experience that those people have, whether they feel like they're being listened to and responded to respectfully. That's all. I just want to kind of.
I concur with that philosophy.
Just kind of, I would disagree with you, Maggie Tai, if we find ourselves in non-compliance. But I also want to touch a little bit on Dan's point and how I think that for me personally, from a DI perspective, you know, different cultures, different, you know, we have different ways of communicating. And so sometimes I feel like what we even have in our, you know, choose word and tone carefully, very, very vague and subjective, right? And then so things that might be comfortable for me may not be comfortable for others. And so I just also want us to balance between the ability to have critical conversation, but definitely, right, recognize that our role as board members and treat staff with respect. That doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything. So how do we balance that, right? So you find us non-compliant, I would agree, but I also would also challenge some of what we currently even have in here, that if we're not careful and we are too suppressive in our tones and things like that, it actually have a backlash. Right, have a backlash, and then it actually become very inflammatory to a certain culture group that might not communicate in a way that we might feel comfortable with. And so we have to be really expansive in our ability to also from a stance of grace and but we are actually community representative. We hold ourselves to a higher standard. I agree. But I just want to put it out there that we should not be also too limiting it.
I think those are really excellent points, and that's something that, like, when we review what goes into this, we should think about that and have that discussion maybe at that point.
Any other thoughts?
I really appreciate Tam's comments, because I think they're very accurate, but I think that that we do need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. I think that you know, while we need to have candid conversations, it crosses the line when talking about either individual or, you know, very specific groups' performances. That's not our role. And it's not that those conversations can't happen. It's that in a public board meeting, I don't think they're appropriate. I think none of us would want to be evaluated on our professional roles in public, certainly by the people that we don't report to. So I think that we've definitely done better as the year has gone on and settled in a much more professional and respectful manner. But I have, frankly, I mean, I don't want to oversay it, but I've been embarrassed to be a board member at times, and I don't like feeling that way.
Andrew, any thoughts?
No thoughts. Or I will have some thoughts. I think there's a really fine balance, and I think it's difficult to find yourself in compliance or not in compliance with such. How people view different things really depends on that person. When we think about, what is our tone and communication, how that looks to one person is different to the next. So I guess it's difficult, I would say, to find yourselves compliant or not in compliance. I mean, I guess everyone has a different point of view, but you do vote on it. I feel like this year, there's definitely been times where the board has been more divided and times where you guys have been more united, but I've always felt like that. A lot of different points of views were brought up, and I think that was for the positive. And I think that this board does a good job of bringing up, all different kinds of opinions from all different, types of groups, and I do, really appreciate that. Maybe, at times from everyone that could be said better, but I think the points that people have brought up have been really good, and it's what a good board needs, different points of view and be able to work with that. So, I am not a board member, so, I can give an advisory vote, but, for you guys, I think there is probably work to be done, but as a board, I think this has been, you guys have done a really good job on, focusing on, important matters and disagreeing, but also knowing that you are serving to better the school district.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to say one last thing, which is again, just to be clear, I think the board's doing actually very well right now, and I think this would be very different like 1 year from now. And maybe would have some fun language in it, but I thank everyone for the thoughtful responses, and I think it's useful to have a conversation.
Yeah, and I totally concur in terms of, what happens at the table is reflective of the whole board. So I agree with that. I do also, I'm a big advocate of critical discussions and giving people time to have those discussions. And I appreciate what Tam says, with different cultures will view suppression in different ways. And if we are overly critical, one culture might see that happen and be even more suppressed themselves. That does make opportunity for somebody who is very brazen to take advantage of that situation. I hear that. But at the same time, suppression is a disadvantage. So that's my comment. Let's do, so what's on the table right now is, do we find the board in compliance item 2 and item 3 or not? Right, so the question on the board table right now is, sorry, does the board find itself not in compliance of item 2 and item 3? Is that correct, Maggie Ty?
Yes.
So we have a motion for that for Maggie Ty. Do we have a second?
Actually, didn't we have a motion to approve the whole thing? So this would have to
We
be like a
did, but
modification.
we did, but
You're moving to amend.
we're moving to.
Right, okay, I'm moving
Yeah.
to amend.
Yeah.
I second.
So there's a motion and a second. And the motion and the second is to find the board not in compliance of 2 and 3. Let's take a vote on that. So by saying aye, you agree we are not in compliance. By saying nay, you disagree with that. Or you believe we are in compliance. Okay, it's a little opposite, it's a little awkward. So because of the way it's worked. So again, if you say aye, you believe we are not in compliance of 2 and 3.
But we are in compliance with 1.
No, let's do that separate.
Okay, okay.
Let's do that separate. Just for 2 and 3. Aye means we're not in compliance. Do I have any ayes? Andrew? Directors?
Aye.
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 So 3 ayes, that we are not in compliance. And, any nays?
Nay.
Nay, so that would be, okay, there we go. So we've got,
Did you vote, David?
yes, I did. We've got 0 for 1 from students. That's saying we are not in compliance. We've got
That we are. in
We are.
compliance.
Sorry. 0, 1 that we are not in compliance.
No,
Oh,
no, you're in compliance.
Yeah.
No, 0-1.
0.
Oh, yeah, right.
0, 1.
Yes. 1 vote no, that we are,
So we are in
Not in-
compliance with the student side.
We've got
Yeah,
the-
I know.
yeah.
And then we've got 3 to two from the directors that we are not in compliance. And with that, the not in compliance for items 2 and 3 will be checked. Okay. You got that, Michelle?
I did.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then for the other items, 1 and 4 and 5, let's take a vote together.
I
So-
move that we find ourselves in compliance for 1, 4, and 5.
Okay, thank you. A second.
Second.
Okay, I've got a second. All those in favor, students?
Aye.
Aye. Directors?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstains? And so for the rest, we are in compliance, 1050. There we go. That was a little procedural challenge, but we got through it. Thank you very much. Oh, lovely. Let's keep this train moving. Board member conflict of interest, D, board policy 1010. Let's, do I have a motion to find the board in compliance as a whole?
So moved.
The second.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, Andrew?
Aye.
And board members?
Aye.
Any against? And with that, the board is in compliance, 1050. Let's move to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion for that?
And will we approve the consent agenda as published?
Seconded.
And all in favor, Andrew?
Aye.
And directors?
Aye.
Nays, so that's passes, 1050. Any superintendent announcements?
I've made all the announcements in my report.
Cheers, thank you. And legislative report, Deborah.
You know, nothing to add from what Dr. Wendell said. It's been a pretty disappointing legislative session and, you know, once we kind of recover from it, I think that we should start working on the next one.
I know our PTA advocacy group is already looking at options as well. So we'll partner together, find other allies like we did through this whole process in other districts and find other student reps who will be coming in to fill in for Mr. Howison, and away we'll go in the next session.
You know, maybe we start talking about if our students want to propose legislation.
Right.
I'll stick around for another year.
Or be a student fellow.
And you can come back and do reports of what it'd be like to carry this forward in college. So let's go for any announcements, includes and reports. Tam?
Just encourage everyone to attend if you can, the school foundation breakfast. You know, our support really means a lot to them when I know there's conflicts, but as people can. I was going to say before break, what did I do? Did we talk about the regional meeting?
No.
So 3 of us attended the regional meeting. Andrew, our students were asked to, one of the things that, was on the agenda was, student representatives. And so our students were asked to come and speak about their experience. And it's just really, you know, not to say we have the best students or anything, but you know, but we did. So, you know, and it's just remarkable and just to show, you know, everyone remembered Andrew from Spokane and once again, wowed everybody. So, you know, it's just really fun to see some of this work and the impact that our students are making. And I just can't even remember.
And one of the topics that came up at the meeting was really interesting. Harlan from Gallagher who's a pediatrician, was talking about how in many other states, districts are able to bill for services that they provide to special education students such as OT and PT, and for that Washington State is the only state where that doesn't happen. and it could be quite a decent, kind of reimbursement stream for us. So he's really pushing WASDA in general and all of the members to kind of be looking at that as something for the future. That when he attended the thing that Deborah attended in Washington, people were like, yeah, I don't know why, Washington State is the only place where this doesn't happen.
It's, it's complicated.
I'm sure,
But
yeah. That was good. Meeting. I attended the IDEA activity at Island Park, which was awesome. It was really great to see. The kids, I think, really enjoyed it. And for those who are unfamiliar, this was like an activity where kids could learn about what it's like to live with, to experience both like physical differences and learning differences, which I didn't realize they were going to be doing the learning differences part. So some of what they had to do was like write in a mirror, or they had to try and solve problems while there was like noise coming in their headphones, and they had to try and do fine motor tasks with gloves on. And then sort of the person, I don't know who the person was who was presenting, but who was sort of organizing the thing, but she did a great job of kind of walking the kids through discussion afterwards. And the teachers that were there were saying they would really like some part of that to be done in their classroom next time around, because so that they can have more class activities around it, you know, and more discussions for the kid that could be tweaked based on the grade level. So anyway, it was great. It was a lot of fun. I went with my kid. It was like a, you know, what do you call that? A stowaway. I was a stowaway with my kid. Which, you know, her class.
Thank you.
So Deborah and I attended the long-range planning committee meeting on Monday. It was pretty information dense. I believe like the video as well as the documents are posted online. For anyone watching, I think the most important that's available publicly is there's 4 different white papers that were posted. The third one is about enrollment and demographics and how that relates to our physical footprint and capacity. So I would take a look at that. In particular, one of the things we talked about is having, you know, overcapacity at the elementary, and what does that think about when we're looking at aging facilities. So we touched on that at a high level, and in the meetings going forward, I think that'll be explored in greater depth. And the other thing I want to touch upon that I think individually mentioned to various board members, but wanted to sort of as my public service announcement is I was not aware of Zelensky's television series, Servant of the People. I mean, at a high level I was like, oh, it's funny, Zelensky played a president and now he actually is the president. I highly recommend it to anybody. I would posit that it's the most consequential television series ever. It gave birth to the governing party of Ukraine now. And the party that is governing Ukraine is called Servant of the People, based on the television show, which was created and produced by Zelensky. And I guess a couple of like comments on that. In the television series, he plays a high school history teacher. So the persona that he adopted very intentionally was that of a teacher, of a public teacher teaching history. And just through the first 5 or 6 episodes, talks about the importance of like Plutarch and Lincoln and various historical figures. So if there ever was, I think, a testament to the importance of a classical education and what it takes to inspire a country who then finds itself engaged in trench warfare against an authoritative leader in Putin. There's a lot that can be learned from Servant of the People. Is also what it means to serve in public office and the importance of art, sometimes, you know, foreshadowing life and then influencing life in the very most significant ways possible. So a shout out to Servant of the People. It's streaming on Netflix. It's incredible.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. I have nothing else to add with that. Do I have a motion to adjourn? And a second?
Seconded.
All in favor? Andrew?
Aye.
Directors?
Aye.
Opposed? With that, we've got a 1050 to adjourn at 8:09.
See you at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.